Night fell quickly. By the harbor, the seaside cafe glowed under bright lanterns and crackling bonfires, its lively hum carrying all the way to the Temple of Records. Damien glanced at the lights shimmering on the water as soon as he finished posting the evening notice at the gate. He'd promised himself a hot meal here after work. Street lamps flanked the paved road, so even after 8 o'clock, the path remained pleasantly illuminated and thankfully free of shadows that might spook him. Still, Damien couldn't help but wish he'd arranged to have his car shipped in from Xandar City sooner. On foot, every trip to the waterfront grill felt slow, wasting time he could have spent elsewhere. At last, he arrived. The cafe's outdoor tables were crowded with young faces, some seated, others standing around roaring bonfires. Goblets of wine and platters of steaming food passed from hand to hand, and everyone's laughter rang out over the water. Damien paused at the edge of the crowd, struck by how youthful every reveler looked, unlike the seasoned merchants and sailors he'd expected. He smiled to himself, curious to see what the rest of the evening would bring. No one in the room looked older than 30, most were in their early 20s. They clinked wine glasses, chatted animatedly, and dove into the buffet with surprising speed. Casual jeans, leather jackets, and designer sneakers replaced tuxedos and evening gowns, nothing like the formal soirees Damien had attended in the past. He hesitated in the doorway, trying to make sense of it all. The moment he stepped onto the marble floor, 100 heads turned. Curious eyes scanned him from top to bottom. For a brief second, Damien felt every heartbeat echo in his chest. Then a tall figure with silver hair and an easy smile broke away from the crowd and strode toward him. "I never expected you to come, Mr. Grant," the man said. His tone was warm, almost teasing. "If I'd known you were planning to show up, I'd have had Kyle send a car for you." Damien managed a tight smile. Everyone here knew, and perhaps doubted, that an ordinary guy like him would actually attend a gathering of superpowered individuals. Yet here he was. And as Renaud, one of the most charismatic hosts in the room, clapped him on the shoulder, Damien realized he was about to learn just how extraordinary this evening could become. Sarah barely had time to straighten her posture before Lord Renaud materialized before her in a shimmer of gold. Her heart fluttered, but she forced a calm smile. "Good evening, Lord Renaud. I was invited, so I thought I'd come and see what it's like," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. Renaud spared her a reassuring glance. "Don't worry, Miss Sarah. Tonight's gathering is far less formal than the usual island banquets. We'll simply sit, eat, and drink to our heart's content and share any interesting experiences or recent successes." He noticed the effort it took for her to smile, but said nothing more. After all, she and Miss Sonia had both been so kind to him. It was only right that Sarah now had the chance to return the favor by helping with the table. "Thank you, Lord Renaud," Sarah replied, relief threading through her tone. With that, she followed him toward a long oak table already occupied by Renaud himself, Lacey, the predictor, Kyle, and Tony. Platters of roasted meats, fresh fruits, and delicate pastries glistened under the soft lantern light. Each table boasted the same lavish spread, one of the reasons Tony's dinners were so eagerly anticipated across the island. Sarah slipped onto the bench beside Lacey and placed her hands neatly in her lap, intent on making the evening as smooth and enjoyable as possible for her guests. Lacey noticed the nervous look on Sarah's face and offered a gentle reassurance. "There's really no need to be so tense. Everyone was just surprised to see you. You can be sure no one here means you any harm. And please," Lacey added, "feel free to take anything you need. If it's out of reach, just let us know and we'll get it for your ow." Kyle, observing Sarah sitting quietly beside Lacey, realized this was her first time at an event like this. He decided to keep his tone light and straightforward. "By the way," he said, "I meant to ask at lunch, how long have you been on the island?" Tony, flashing a friendly smile, chimed in, "Yeah, counting today, how many days has it been?" 8 days, Sarah replied, her initial tension easing as she settled into the warm, welcoming atmosphere. Sarah gave him a small smile. "It's only your 8th day here, so you're still new to the island. Give it some time, you'll see there's really nothing to fear. Everyone here has remarkable abilities, but under Miss Sonia's leadership, no one starts fights or runs wild." You could even wander around at midnight without running into trouble, though I wouldn't recommend it. Getting a proper night's rest is always the wisest choice. Tony leaned forward, curious. Why is everyone so eager to follow Miss Sonia's rules? Sarah hesitated for a moment. His question eased some of her worry, but planted a new seed of doubt. You were rescued by Miss Sonia, weren't you? Did she ever tell you anything about herself, or why she's in charge here? Damien's eyes widened. She told you? He asked, surprise evident in his voice. No, Damien said, shaking his head. Miss Sonia was very clear. There isn't a formal chain of command on the island. The only thing people here truly revere is Lord Cassidin. Sarah frowned. Yet the adults listen to her when she speaks. Just because she's Lord Cassidin's housekeeper and commands their respect doesn't automatically make her their manager. Exactly, Damien agreed. She offered me a role and told me outright that I could leave whenever I wished. That was the entirety of our conversation. She was in a rush and couldn't go into much detail. Sarah ran a hand through her hair, still perplexed. On one hand, Senior Sonia had insisted there were no superiors or subordinates. On the other, Tony Stark claimed she oversaw everything on the island. Has Miss Sonia ever given you the impression she was in charge of the whole place? Damien met her gaze steadily. She wouldn't lie to you. Kyle smiled and began to explain. Officially, she's Lord Cassidin's housekeeper. Everyone on the island knows her in that role. But in reality, she's much more than that. She's his spokesperson, our only direct link to him. Practically nothing happens here without Miss Sonia's approval. And that's before you even consider the staggering power she wields. Just her position alone should command your respect. Chapter 222, Understanding and Respect. The Void Cult's disciples had become incredibly powerful, so when Sarah arrived, all eyes turned toward her and hung on her every word. At the same time, they welcomed Sonia's gazes with equal enthusiasm. They revered Sonia deeply and were more than willing to follow her guidance, even though, on this island, the only acknowledged authority above them was Lord Cassidin himself. They appreciated that Sonia treated them as equals, not mere underlings. Miss Sonia's strength is truly unfathomable, Lord Kyle murmured, his tone filled with wonder. Sarah tilted her head. The emphasis in Kyle's words struck her as odd. What do you mean? She asked. Kyle exchanged a glance with another cult member before replying, None of us have ever seen her unleash her full power. Sarah's brow furrowed. Then how do you know it exists? He smiled, a mixture of pride and awe in his expression. Because Sonia taught nearly everyone on the island to fly. She demonstrated abilities far beyond what any of us thought possible. Sarah's eyes widened. You never told me about that. Kyle shook his head. I always assumed Miss Sonia was just, well, ordinary, just like the rest of us. Hearing this, Sarah felt her view of Sonia shift. Everything she'd taken for granted about the woman's quiet confidence suddenly felt incomplete, and she found herself whispering under her breath, She's far more than she seems. Miss Sonia used to be a nobody, but after being seen and blessed by Lord Cassidin, she joined the Void Cult, and she's anything but ordinary now. Renoli glanced over at Sarah, recalling how unimpressive Sonia had been the first time he'd laid eyes on her. 2 years ago, he and Kyle had come seeking the same blessing, hoping to join the Void God cult. Back then, Sonia appeared to be a newcomer herself. Her speed and power were hardly remarkable, yet anyone who gains direct favor from Cassidin is destined to surge ahead. In just 2 years, Sonia's abilities have skyrocketed, a fact every member of the Void Cult openly acknowledges. No one dares cross her, much less risk drawing the wrath of Master Cassidin. And Sonia's contributions to Void Island? They're plain for everyone to see. Sarah let out a low whistle. So it's not just a promotion you get when the Void Lord takes you under his wing, she mused. Sarah's voice was low but firm. Miss Sonia never told you how to pass Lord Cassidin's trial, did she? And you shouldn't expect anyone else to spell it out for you. The island's code is ruthlessly clear. No one may reveal the specifics of the test or its passing criteria. You are special. Miss Sonia personally brought you here and laid out a year-long assignment. Learn the island's ways, immerse yourself in its secrets, and prove yourself worthy of the great god of the void, Cassidin. When Damien heard her words, he realized why Miss Sonia had been so guarded. Sarah clearly knew more than she'd said. yet she wouldn't or couldn't say any more. Still, her warning carried a strange comfort. The trials of the Void Cult had already grown far more grueling than rumored. What was meant to be a short ordeal had stretched into months of hardship and danger. Every inhabitant of Void Island seemed to wield some uncanny power, proof that earning Cassidon's favor would grant unimaginable strength. Yet without any clue what the test entailed, an ordinary person like Damien would struggle just to survive a single month here, let alone a year. Ordinary people seldom manage to spend months on this island, sustaining unbroken faith in the Void God. Lacey had counted herself fortunate more than once. Rumor had it that countless outsiders doubted the religion's legitimacy, yet she had leapt at the chance to join its ranks. Damien listened quietly as Lacey offered her encouragement. He remembered Senior Sonia's stern warning. If she revealed the trial's secrets, it would only make passing the test more difficult. Sonia had never spelled out the rules. Instead, she'd told him that true recognition from Lord Cassidon would follow only genuine, wholehearted effort. Vague though it was, and far from a guaranteed success, it was the only guidance Sonia could provide without breaking her own vows. Damien met Lacey's kind eyes and inclined his head in gratitude. "Thank you, Lady Lacey. I'll keep your advice close and give it everything I've got." "Miss Sarah, if you can secure Lord Cassidon's approval, you'll be fully welcomed into the Void Cult," Kyle said, offering her an encouraging smile. "If not, you'll have to leave eventually, but I really hope you make it. After all, one more comrade means one more ally." Sarah nodded, realizing just how crucial this opportunity was. She had heard Elder Sonia's warning that Lord Cassidon's thoughts were utterly inscrutable. Even with Sonia's personal recommendation, there was no guarantee she'd pass his test. All she could do was keep her doubts to herself and let fate take its course. Nearby, Tony ate his meal in silence, quietly following their exchange. Most cult members didn't know Damien's true background, but Tony did, and that comforted Sarah more than she let on. The Void Cult's initiation trials are notoriously grueling. Ordinarily, aspirants can wait months before even stepping through its doors. Yet once Damien caught their eye, the process could be accelerated to mere minutes. After all, Pepper, Steve, and Banner had all gained entry with minimal scrutiny. Damien himself would never have been content to sit idle, nor would he pick an outsider as his scribe without a personal endorsement from Sonia. And yet, that's exactly what happened. He appointed Sarah as the official recorder. As long as Sarah keeps a low profile and steers clear of any shady dealings, it's only a matter of time before the cult formally acknowledges her and opens its ranks to her. Dinner stretched well past midnight. At long last, everyone, heartily fed and well-watered, rose from the table, offering a collective thanks to Tony Stark before slipping out into the night. Sarah's glowing report of Sonia's esteem only deepened their respect for her. Back at the mountainside villa, Sonia slipped into a soft nightgown and settled onto the balcony. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. A photograph showing Sonia seated alongside Renoli, Kyle, and Tony, each of them animatedly tending to Sarah's needs. A small smile curved Sonia's lips, comforted by the knowledge that her friends had stepped forward on Sarah's behalf. "I'd be happy to polish this for you. It looks like I only have a single line at the moment. Could you please paste the entire chapter you'd like rewritten? That way I can ensure all plot points, characters, including renaming Harvey to Damien, and details are properly retained and rendered in smooth, idiomatic English." Chapter 223. Members on Blue Star. Damien watched the activity on the island closely, aware of everything unfolding at the dinner party. Although Sarah's identity seemed exceptional to many members of the Void Cult, none of them treated her with disrespect or behaved improperly. On the contrary, they welcomed her among their ranks. Damien realized that, even as the Void Cult grew ever stronger, they still extended common courtesy to ordinary people. Such a friendly attitude toward outsiders, and especially toward those who might one day become allies, was the unbreakable foundation of the Void God religion. After enjoying a hot bath, Damien slept soundly through the night. The next afternoon, Miss Sonia summoned Tony up to the mountaintop villa. Having just installed the Jarvis system, he climbed the winding path to find Sonia waiting beside the gravity control console. She handed him a datapad loaded with the latest situation reports and handover orders from several planetary councils. "We need you to bring the gravity device online and review these documents," she said. Tony nodded, already reviewing the first files in preparation for the next phase of their mission. Damien was on site to oversee the gravity drive project, since managing that technology fell naturally to him. By hearing customers' needs directly, he could devise ways to meet them, and even create entirely new products. That approach would boost both Void Island's profits and Damien's own reputation. Sonia watched him assemble the preliminary figures. "How much are they prepared to invest?" Damien leaned back in his chair, reviewing the client's request one more time. "They've been impressed by our breakthroughs in intelligent AI," he began. "Now they want us to develop an independent AI assistant module, something that will significantly increase the battleship's computing power and operational efficiency." He paused, tapping a pen on the desk. "They've offered a budget in the range of 10 to 30 million credits. Sonia frowned slightly. "We'll need to build in robust firewalls around the AI core. Without strong cyber defenses, someone could hack or subvert the system." "Absolutely," Damien agreed. "Security is non-negotiable." Sonia folded her arms, thinking. To put this in perspective, a capital battleship like theirs normally costs between 200 and 500 million credits to design and maintain, and it takes a whole team to keep all the systems running smoothly. Damien nodded. "Which is exactly why our auxiliary AI will be so valuable. If we can demonstrate its reliability and resilience, they'll see it as essential, possibly even indispensable." He closed his notepad, ready to draw up the formal proposal. With the right mix of innovation and security, Damien was confident they could exceed the client's expectations and secure a lucrative new contract for Void Island. Sonia tapped a few commands on her datapad and looked up at Damien. "If we equip the battleship's command core with advanced AI, every system directive will execute faster and more efficiently. The catch, of course, is that few manufacturers can deliver genuine, cutting-edge neural processors. That's why shipboard AIs usually cost between 5 and 20 million credits." She paused, sliding a holoscreen into Damien's view. It showed schematics of a next-generation optical brain, technology far beyond conventional AI. True optical cores like these are the province of only two powers in the galaxy, the Kree Empire and the Nova Corps. They guard them jealously. Our clients wouldn't dare request that level of hardware, so they've stretched their budget to 30 million credits in the hope that you can at least approximate optical-grade performance. They're pinning their fortunes on you. Damien studied the swirling data streams, processing benchmarks, neural mesh layouts, intrusion resistance ratings. He frowned. "I can promise they'll be safe from anything on par with a standard AI," he said. Sonia tapped her lip. "But I won't lie. It'll be hard to guarantee immunity against a genuine optical brain." Damien exhaled, brushing his fingertips against the projection's edge. If he could pull this off, it wouldn't just secure the client's trust, it would open the door to untold wealth and a reputation no rival could touch. Damien sat quietly as Tony Stark and his colleague hashed out the future of Blue Star's AI program. Tony made no secret of how ruthless the technology race had become, especially in artificial intelligence, where even a tiny lead in processing power could vanish overnight as competitors caught up. If Blue Star hoped to stake its claim in the coming interstellar era, its AI simply couldn't afford to lag behind. "Right now, you're in over your head," Tony said, turning back to Damien. "I want you to set this aside for the moment. Find someone to team up with, someone whose strengths complement yours. And remember, this isn't the only project worth pursuing." Damien nodded. Back on Blue Star, he'd been known as a prodigy among his peers. At that age, few could match his abilities. But beside a genuine super genius like Tony Stark, he still had a lot to learn. He also knew he wasn't the only brilliant mind from home. Dr. Bruce Banner, Sue Lee, sister of the Black Panther, and Helen Zhao were all trailblazers in their fields. If anyone could help carry the AI initiative forward, it was one of them. With renewed determination, Damien began to consider who might join him in this next phase of the project. Damien tapped his stylus against the console. "Once Banner's powers stabilize a bit more, I'll take a closer look at this AI design." At Damien's words, Tony Cassadine's mind immediately jumped to Bruce Banner. Banner had only just joined the Void and was still learning to harness his abilities. It would be months before he could handle a project of this scale. In the meantime, their top priority was to perfect an ultra-powerful optocore. With that in hand, they could deploy a fully autonomous advanced AI to other civilizations without ever endangering Earth. Sonia frowned. Banner. Never heard of him. Who is he? Tony gave her a half-smile. Bruce Banner, a super genius whose intellect rivals my own. And yes, he's officially part of the Void cult. He sighed. Right now, though, his body's too unstable. He can't fully control the energy inside him, so he's still here on Earth, on Blue Star. With that, Tony ran Sonia through Banner's backstory and current status. When he'd finished, she folded her arms. Mr. Cassadine, I take it you've already opened up the Blue Star trials to other candidates? Tony met her steady gaze. Before we get into that, why don't you tell me what you know so far? Sonia studied Mr. Cassadine thoughtfully. I need a head count of every single member of the Void God religion. Since Bruce Banner had arrived from Blue Star, their conversation had turned to business. Sonia wasn't blaming anyone. She simply needed precise numbers. Only by knowing exactly how many followers the Void cult had across the universe could she prepare adequate intelligence and plan safe lines of communication if trouble ever flared. We've long known there are 57 cultists based on Mowgli, she continued. Mowgli hosts a branch of the Void cult, and its members rotate between the planet and this island to worship. After watching them closely, especially Mr. Cassadine, I'm convinced they're true zealots. Cassadine's devotion far exceeds that of the locals, and each fanatic packs formidable power. Should the Void God religion ever go to war, I have no doubt these Mowgli devotees will spearhead the assault. Mr. Cassadine nodded solemnly. With the census in hand, Sonia would be ready for whatever the cultists had planned next. Damien tapped the holo display, scrolling through the roster. Excluding Tony himself, there are currently 4 known Void cult operatives on Blue Star. Sonia leaned forward. Who are they? One is Pepper Potts, Tony's wife. You should recognize the name. The other 3 are Steve Rogers, Peggy Carter, and Bruce Banner. At Damien's words, Aya's eyes widened. She quickly crossed out a blank line on her datapad and entered each name. Damien frowned, as if remembering something important. And don't forget, he added, Void Island alone boasts 512 members in total. Sonia paused to double-check. Pepper had already been on her list, so she simply appended Rogers, Carter, and Banner beneath Tony's entry. With a final tap, she gingerly pressed Send Update Number 4. The data packet blinked out of her comm unit, racing back to headquarters. Outside the viewing port, Blue Star's cobalt seas churned under an alien sky, but inside the control room, all eyes were fixed on the growing threat list. As Sonia exhaled, Damien crossed his arms, bracing for the next briefing. Chapter 224, Short on Funds. You'll learn more about their true identities once they arrive at the base camp, Damien said. And don't worry about Pepper's people stirring up trouble on Blue Star. Tony has it all under control. After Damien named Pepper's associates, he fell silent. There wasn't much point in elaborating. Sonia wouldn't meet them anytime soon. Honestly, he added, knowing Tony is watching my back is a huge relief. Sonia nodded, satisfied. She preferred to focus on what she could see and manage, staying vigilant for any threats that might slip through the cracks. Then she turned to Tony. If you're not working on an AI project right now, what will you research next? Tony leaned back and sighed. To be frank, Void Island is running dangerously low on funds. Sonia's brow shot up. The unspoken questions in her eyes were clear. What now? Damien frowned as he laid out his reasoning. Even though I could revolutionize the energy industry by handing over my arc reactor, I'm terrified what an alien civilization might do with it. Imagine them building unstoppable steel armies. He shook his head. Instead, I'll concentrate on the technologies we need for true starships. My goal is for Blue Star to enter the interstellar age, and that means mastering every aspect of spaceship design and propulsion myself. Tony Stark listened thoughtfully. A genuine arc reactor would command an astronomical price, yet selling such core technology off-planet carried immense risks. On Earth, he'd have no qualms supplying a few reactors to S-Shield. He didn't believe they could mass-produce armor strong enough to threaten global security. But an advanced civilization equipped with arc reactors could field entire battalions of war machines. That technology simply couldn't be allowed to spread. Tony glanced at Sonia when she mentioned their financial shortfall. Void Island brings in, what, 10 billion a year? How are you still scraping by? He turned to Damien. Seriously, Damien, are you really that strapped for cash? Tony, unless you're family, you have no idea how expensive firewood and rice are. Everyone in the Void Divine cult has a bottomless appetite. Just keeping Void Island running costs a small fortune. We've built plenty of facilities, but huge swaths of the island are still untouched. And that's before you even consider the cult's plans to expand our territory. Expansion doesn't come cheap. Sonia's eyes flashed at that last remark. She let out a long, weary sigh. Everyone on the island knows the Void Divine cult intends to grow, but few give much thought to how it will happen. They assume that as long as Master Cassidon and she are in charge, a solution will present itself. It's true that she and Cassidon can devise grand strategies, but having a plan is one thing. Finding the money to put it into action is quite another. Damien leaned back in his chair, surveying the vaulted ceiling of the Void God Temple's council chamber. Even under ideal conditions, it'll take us about 10 years to complete Void Island's first full expansion cycle, he said calmly. That's just how long it takes to nurture the land, build up our resources, and train enough disciples to sustain growth. There's no reason to rush, yet if we can find ways to accelerate the process, all the better. Sonia tapped her pen against her notepad, her brow creased with worry. It's one thing to talk about grand plans, she replied, but another to actually feed and clothe, house, and equip tens of thousands of people on the island. Their needs grow by the day. Tony exchanged a look with Damien, then spoke up. I'll return to the archives tonight and pore over every text we have on advanced cultivation techniques. Maybe there's some overlooked method to boost production. If we can push our breakthroughs even a little faster, we'll ease the burden on the island sooner. Sonia nodded gratefully, but her relief was tinged with exhaustion. Tony gave Damien a sidelong glance, one laden with unspoken reproach. Damien felt the weight of that look. He knew exactly what Tony was thinking. Why hadn't I pushed for this sooner? Why was I only now scrambling for solutions? He forced a small smile. I understand your frustration, he said quietly, but my hands have been tied. I've already allocated 200 million taels for our immediate needs. Everything else I owned went straight into your fund, Sonia, so you could marshal resources for Void Island's development. At this rate, I'm still bringing in 50 million taels a day from our cultivation bases, but I've also got the Void God sect to oversee. I can't personally run every bounty assignment or expedition. That would only deprive our disciples of their own opportunities. Tony folded his arms. Understood. You've done more for this sect than anyone else. We'll make it work. Sonia closed her notepad with resolve. Then let's get to it. We'll find a way to accelerate our research and keep the islanders fed. We owe them nothing less. As the council dispersed, Damien remained seated for a moment, letting the weight of leadership settle on his shoulders. It was a heavy burden, but one he'd chosen willingly, and one he would carry to the end. Damien leaned back in his chair, studying Tony's anxious expression. As a senior member of the Void God cult, he knew all too well that he couldn't be cruising from one end of the continent to the other on a whim, unless a disaster response mission forced his hand. In the past, when his name meant nothing, he'd never worried about appearances. Now, however, with his reputation on the rise, he had to guard his image carefully. Yet Tony's furtive glance at the empty coffers on the holo display told a blunt truth. Void Island was flat broke. Damien's mind raced. If he assumed a new identity and signed up for bounty assignments, he could bring in extra credits. No one would suspect a thing. After all, he had nothing pressing on his schedule. He gave Tony a calm nod. Mr. Tony, there's really no need to rush. Please take your time. Across the sleek conference table, Sonia exhaled in relief and offered him a warm smile. Thank you. I can't snap my fingers and speed up our R&D overnight, but I'll push the team as hard as I can. With today's agreement in place, I'll be heading back to the lab. She gathered her datapads and rose. Just as she reached the door, Tony cleared his throat. By the way, Miss Sonia, do you have any recommendations for celebrity hotels? I expect Damien here will need somewhere discreet to stay. Sonia paused, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Well, the Silver Crescent in the Old District is favored by dignitaries, excellent privacy protocols. Up north, the Golden Lotus caters to VIPs who don't mind paying for premium service. Tony gave her an appreciative nod, then turned back to Damien with a half-smile. He straightened his jacket and quipped, "Just so you're aware, celebrity hotels are really just upscale lodging. They don't come with the extracurricular services some folks imagine, Mr. Damien." Damien let out a quiet chuckle. Bounty contracts under a covert alias, then a respectable suite in a 5-star hotel. This plan just might save Void Island. He stood, already mapping out his next move. Tony shrugged. They'll take care of your every need during the day, meals, errands, the lot, but they don't include bedtime companionship. If you want extras, they'll arrange it, though I can't recommend anyone in particular. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You'll see what suits you once you try. Sonia gave a wry smile. She wasn't in the least surprised that Tony wanted to check into a celebrity hotel. After all, he'd only just returned to Xandar and certainly deserved some time off before diving back into work. All right, she said. I'll make the reservation. Tony nodded, pleased. Even without the bed service, he was confident he could find entertainment on his own. He stood and left, leaving Sonia and Damien alone in the sleek glass and steel lounge. Damien Cassidon set down his game controller and looked across the room at Sonia. Sonia, he began, his tone serious for the first time this evening, I'll be going out every day for the next few weeks. Sonia frowned in surprise. Every day? Won't you be gone for too long? Well, the Void Divine Religion is running low on funds, Mr. Cassidon admitted, folding his arms. So I've decided to go out incognito, take on a few bounty missions to earn some credits and keep myself occupied. Damien gave a thoughtful nod. Hearing those words, Sonia's cheeks warmed with regret. It was her careless comment to Mr. Tony about the island's dwindling treasury that had spurred this plan. If only she'd kept her mouth shut, Cassidon wouldn't be about to venture off daily under an assumed name. But the remark was out there now, and Cassidon had made up his mind. There was no persuading him otherwise. Sonia forced a tight smile, masking her worry, and inclined her head. Understood, she said softly. A moment of silence followed, broken only by the soft chime of her comm device. She tapped the screen and announced, 5th update sent. With that, the decision was set. Cassidon would soon vanish into the shadows in pursuit of bounties, and Sonia could only hope he returned safely. Chapter 225, That's Such a Pity. Damien shifted before Sonia's eyes, his solemn, almost holy presence dissolving into something cold and fearsome. Black robes swirled around him, and the air itself seemed to shiver with his transformation. Intrigued, Sonia craned her neck to study the figure in the hood. Yet all she saw beneath the cowl was an abyss of shadow, no features, no hint of the man inside. The darkness on his face was so absolute it left her breathless. Damien paid her startled gaze no mind. He tapped a few commands into a concealed wrist terminal, registering a new account under the name Cassidon. Then, as if logging in after a long absence, he accessed the top-secret bounty hunter database known as Light and Shadow. His alias topped the leaderboard, God of the Void, Cassidon. He clicked through to the entry's summary. At the pinnacle of every bounty is Cassidon, the Void God, a legend unmatched in the hunter world. A solitary figure who commands entire star systems, the sworn enemy of catastrophes and cosmic beasts, bearer of immeasurable power, and the founder of the Void God cult. Seeing it laid out so plainly, Sonia could only stare. Cassidon, stood unchallenged at the summit of every wanted list. And yet, here he was, standing quietly beside her. It was such a pity, so few could appreciate the full weight of his notoriety. Damien leaned back in his chair, gazing out at the restless sea beyond Void Island's rocky cliffs. Although he'd officially retired to this remote outpost near the Xandar starport, known by sailors as the Fallen Star, his influence lingered. The Void cult, still bearing his mark, counted nearly 400 operatives across the system. He tapped the console at his side and brought up his personal dossier. Scrolling down to the team roster, he saw Void cult listed with 387 members. His own name sat at the very top, proudly labeled Leader. Below him were the names of his lieutenants and agents. A handful of them, Renoli, Kyle, Predictor, and Lacey, had risen to third-level bounty hunters. Together, they'd completed more than 127 Level 3 contracts, their teamwork praised for its speed and precision. All four were headquartered here on Void Island, tirelessly patrolling the corridors of Xandar's underworld. The rest of the cult's membership hovered at the second bounty hunter tier, still competent but far from elite. Damien frowned as he read. "When did Renoli and the others break into Level 3? He muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He tapped a few more commands into the console, preparing to dig deeper into the logs. If his protégés were advancing this quickly, he'd need to know why and how they'd done it without his notice. Damien eased back in his chair as Sonia glanced around the briefing room, gathering her thoughts. "It was about 8 months ago," she began. "Mr. Renoli threw himself a week-long celebration. Nearly everyone on the island was invited. He blew over 300 million credits on that one party alone. After that, he went totally off the radar. Quiet, low-key, almost unrecognizable." Sonia paused, offering Damien a half-smile. "You know, I nearly jumped when I saw Cassidon today. His face is completely different, but the voice, the mannerisms, it's him, all right." Damien grinned. 300 million credits? He must have been beside himself when the bill came due. You could buy a decent space cruiser for that kind of money. "You're not wrong," Sonia agreed. By comparison, when Kyle and the others leveled up to third-rank bounty hunters, they held a modest 3-day bash, cost them maybe 100 million credits. They weren't about to go overboard. Damien's expression turned thoughtful. "That quartet they roll with, 3 of them have actual superpowers, and Lacey, well, she's downright ruthless. Ever since she tapped into the void, her strength shot through the roof. She blasted straight to 3rd rank in no time." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Remember when Tony showed up? It wasn't even a fight, just one-sided slaughter. Those 4 tore through him before anyone could blink." Damien paused over the war report. With all 4 Void God Cult champions on the field, a conflict that had once been evenly matched would now swing decisively in their favor. He scanned each member's dossier. They came from every corner of the galaxy, Alduria, Zephyria, Krivos, but conspicuously, not a single one hailed from Mowgli's star. That absence nagged at him. Mowgli's harsh, untamed environment forged inhabitants with physical fitness that routinely outpaced even the gene-enhanced Xandarians. If any planet could produce warriors to rival or surpass the cult's recruits, it would be Mowgli. Yet every newsfeed he checked ran silent. No uprisings, no sudden breakthroughs, no sign that Mowgli warriors had joined the fray. Damien sighed and set the thought aside. Next, he logged into the Bounty Hunter network and opened the mission ledger. 2 years had slipped by since the cult first emerged, and the disaster relief contracts hadn't disappeared. Instead, every single one had been claimed by the Void God Cult's operatives. Even more astounding, one name dominated every assignment roster: Lacey. It wasn't hard to guess why. Early on, she'd taken a few disaster calls on a whim, just to see what would happen. She'd discovered how quickly those high-risk missions accelerated her growth, then never looked back. Now she'd cornered the entire market on disaster relief, racking up danger pay and eclipsing every rival hunter in both experience and reputation, and with her on their side, no one stood a chance of balancing this war. Damien sighed as he scanned the bounty board on Void Island. Since most of the high-priority disaster relief jobs had already gone, the remaining tasks looked downright pathetic. With so few worthwhile assignments available, he wasn't surprised that half the guild was still hanging around the island, twiddling their thumbs. Damien needed something better than this, so he decided to stretch his legs and go for a walk. He paused at the list of Level 3 escort missions. Pay rates ranged from a few 100,000 to 1 million credits per day. On paper, that sounded tempting, but every contract demanded a guard shift running several days or even half a month straight. Damien might consider an offer if it paid at least 5 million per day, but there wasn't a single mission on the board that touched 1 million. Shaking his head in mild disgust, he closed his eyes and let his energy signature shift. In an instant, he appeared as Cassidon, silver robes swirling around golden armor plates. With a graceful sigh, he stretched out onto the stone bench. Sonia, who'd been watching him pore over the bounties, jumped to her feet. She glanced between the board and the hooded figure, certain he was about to step off on some new adventure. But as she hurried over, Cassidon's form shimmered again, and Damien lay there once more, in his own skin. "Damien?" Sonia asked, concern edging her voice. "Everything all right?" He cracked one eye open, offering her a lazy grin. "Just bored," he replied, swinging a leg off the bench. "No worthwhile jobs today. Let's go grab something to eat." She relaxed and returned his grin. "All right, but you pick the place, somewhere that pays better than these escort jobs." "Deal," Damien said, standing and brushing dust from his tunic. Side by side, they left the bounty board behind, ready to find a task, or at least a decent meal, to make the day worthwhile. "Damien, what's wrong?" Sonia asked, concern creasing her brow as he flopped onto the couch. He lay on his back, arms folded behind his head. "I don't want to go out on any more jobs," he said, voice flat. "I was hoping to make some extra credits, but every high-paying contract has vanished." Sonia leaned forward. "There must be other work available." He shook his head. "All that's left are bodyguard gigs. You know I don't do that kind of job." "That's a shame," she replied softly. "It gets worse," Damien continued. "The Void cult has swept through the Graf bounty market. Good pay and easy assignments, they're gone, for now at least." Sonia reached out and gently squeezed his hand. "Even if you're not taking missions yourself, our growing reputation still reflects on you. You shouldn't be so discouraged." She smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "Every system knows the Void God religion is on the rise, and with you leading it, not even Xandar's Nova Corps would dare challenge us." Damien let her words sink in, a small smile tugging at his lips. Maybe things weren't so bleak after all. Damien tucked the edge of his journal beneath his arm and glanced once more at the hollow display hovering in the corner of Sonia's workshop. Outside Xandar's official channels, any truly groundbreaking research or invention is strictly curtailed, unless you're on good terms with the Nova Corps. They've already snapped up every genuine prodigy who might upset the technological balance. Yet day after day, eager clients still press Mr. Stark for more futuristic marvels, unconcerned that he's fighting an uphill battle against red tape and cosmic bureaucracy. Damien met Sonia's warm smile across the workbench. She didn't pity him. He could see that in the sparkle of her eyes, and honestly, he was past caring whether they felt sorry for his situation. He'd found a strange serenity on this quiet island. Sonia cooked for him each morning, brought fresh fruit and brewed coffee at dusk, and never once questioned his silences. The only drawback was the isolation. No bustling markets, no chance encounters with friends. And yet, in that very seclusion, he discovered an unexpected truth. Sometimes, the hardest times bring the greatest contentment. Today marked his 26th sunrise among the palms. He paused to reflect on how much he owed this little community. He owed Uchpoji, who first unlocked the workshop door for him when the rest of the island was wary. He owed his brothers and sisters, his newfound family, who offered counsel, laughter, and a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. And most of all, he owed Brother Wang, whose timely reward had given Damien the means to buy tools and supplies he otherwise couldn't afford. Closing his journal, Damien allowed himself a satisfied grin. No matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter how many hidden regulations or cosmic patrols tried to cage innovation, he had found refuge here. In adversity, he'd stumbled upon genuine happiness, and for that, he was profoundly grateful. Chapter 226, The Inventor of the Void Cult. Tony stepped out of Damien's villa and made his way directly to the celebrity hotel. His attire was anything but ostentatious. After months spent on Void Island, he still wore the simple clothing he'd brought with him from Blue Star. No luxury hovercar waited outside, no sleek starfighter or battleship. He had simply walked in through the front doors. Unsurprisingly, the hotel staff paid him little mind as he entered. But the moment he looked around, Tony understood why the celebrity hotel was the pride of Xandar Star. Its lavish decor surpassed any accommodation he'd ever seen back home, and every staff member seemed to be a one-in-a-million beauty, each with her own distinctive style. The hotel didn't stick with the same receptionist for long. To keep the experience fresh, they rotated personnel regularly. La Latina, for instance, had been reassigned just 2 days earlier. Today's attendant glanced up at Tony the instant he stepped inside, yet none of her colleagues gave the newcomer so much as a second glance. In our line of work, high-profile guests usually arrive by one of two routes: the cliff-hanging ladder or the apron gate. Those who step through the grand entrance almost never stay more than a day or two, and you can spot the well-heeled or powerful at a single glance. Once you've been on the job a while, most of these regulars pick one receptionist as their favorite, so steady bookings aren't a problem. This afternoon, Damien was off duty, and Lalatina was handling the front desk. It had been quiet for some time, no new arrivals, so she was surprised when a man approached. He didn't have the bearing of a wealthy guest, so the other villa managers around us barely glanced his way. Determined to show she was attentive, Lalatina stepped forward with a bright smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. How can I assist you today?" The newcomer froze. Apparently he'd expected indifference, not a greeting. He turned his head in a mild daze and took in Lalatina's tall, graceful figure. She stood about 1.76 meters, with soft brown hair framing a striking face and an air of quiet authority. For a moment, neither spoke, each measuring the other in silence. Then the guest cleared his throat, drew himself upright, and prepared to state his business. "I'm here to try it out." When Damien told the attendant what he needed, and that he'd come merely to experience it, the other young, beautiful women in the lounge perked up. Their eyes flicked to Lalatina, who'd already stepped forward, a teasing smile playing on her lips. After all, most guests couldn't afford a long stay in a celebrity-grade hotel, but they could easily drop tens of thousands for a single night. Lalatina's voice was smooth as silk. "Sir, have you heard about our experience package? If not, allow me to explain." Damien had planned only to dip his toes in and see what the hotel offered. Now, curiosity sparked. He leaned forward. "Experience package? Please tell me more." "Our experience packages come in 3 tiers, 1 day, 3 day, and 5 day, Lalatina explained. Each day costs 20,000 yuan, but you can check in at any time without making an appointment. And if you change your mind, you can request a refund at any point. We count each day from noon to noon, so if you leave early, we'll charge you only for the hours you stayed and return the balance to you." She frowned slightly. To be honest, it can get frustrating. Many guests book the 5-day package up front, then check out after just 1 day and ask for a refund. That kind of back and forth really eats into our costs. After all, a celebrity hotel like this isn't cheap, and if you can't afford to stick around or haven't mastered mingling in our dance circle, you're just throwing money away. Damien listened coolly, and Tony, standing beside him, didn't bat an eye at the 20,000 yuan daily rate either. Damien's net worth already topped 10 billion, and he was pulling in around 40 million each day. With his next-generation tech almost ready, that figure could easily double. Money, it seemed, was the last thing on his mind. Leaning back, he asked casually, "What if I walk in without a reservation and decide to stay longer?" Tony, the hotel's front desk manager, straightened. "If you check in without a reservation, sir, there's a one-time non-refundable fee of 300,000. Lalatina, his assistant, chimed in to clarify. "No refunds at all." "That's fine," Damien said without hesitation. "Book me in for a year." Tony suppressed a smile. Ever since he'd laid eyes on the celebrity secretaries, Miss Sonia and Miss Sarah, he'd been itching to recruit someone of their caliber for his own office. "Very good, sir," he said. "I'm Lalatina. Please follow me, and I'll show you to your suite." Lalatina motioned down a polished marble hallway. Damien, his identity obscured by a baseball cap and sunglasses, fell in step beside her. His handsome profile was unmistakable even in disguise, and as the doors to the executive wing slid open, Lalatina thought to herself that life at this hotel was about to get a lot more interesting. Damien had only been on the job at the celebrity hotel front desk for a short time, so he was determined to give every guest impeccable service. Today, however, he worried that the long lull since his last arrival would leave his performance rusty, until Lalatina swept up to the desk with a distinguished-looking visitor in tow. "Damien, this is our next guest," she said, offering a polite curtsy. "Please take care of him." The man, tall, casually dressed, but with an easy confidence, nodded in Damien's direction. Damien plastered on his brightest welcome smile. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the Celebrity Hotel. May I have your name, please? And if you'll step forward to the holo projector, I'll just scan your details and complete your registration. Lalatina tapped a command on her wrist console, assigning row 0666 as the guest's room reservation number. A pale blue holo interface shimmered into view above the desk. Damien guided the guest closer. Just look into the scanner, he instructed politely. The man did so without hesitation. Within a second, the display confirmed his credentials, and then filled in his name in bold letters. Tony Stark. A ripple of surprise ran through the line of villa managers standing behind Damien. Whispers flitted from one to the next. That can't be right. Tony Stark, the founder of Void Cult, the gravity field devices, everyone on Xandar owns one of his models. Damien's jaw went slack, and he hurried to compose himself. Mr. Stark, he said, voice steadier than he felt, we are honored to have you. Your room is ready whenever you are. May I escort you to the elevators? Tony Stark offered him a friendly half-smile. Thank you. Lead the way. As Damien guided the famed inventor down the marble corridor, he caught glimpses of the other managers returning to their own duties, silently buzzing about the casual billionaire in their midst, and marveling that someone so legendary could look so ordinary. Tony Stark's outfit was surprisingly unremarkable. No cutting-edge fabrics or designer logos, just plain, everyday clothes. Lalatina blinked in genuine surprise. So you really are Mr. Stark, she said, bowing politely. My name is Lalatina, and I will be at your service for the coming year. She offered him a warm smile. If at any point you're unhappy with your villa, or with me as your attendant, you may request a change. I hope you'll enjoy your stay. Please, if you'll follow me, I'll show you to your villa now. From the way she carried herself, Lalatina knew instantly that this was no ordinary guest. She led Tony Stark down the marble-floored corridor, every step measured and calm, already anticipating the unique challenges and privileges that the next 12 months would bring. Chapter 227, Taken for Granted. Damien followed Lalatina up to the swinging rope ladder. She glanced back at him with a knowing smile. Mr. Stark, you're from the Void Cult, aren't you? Tony Stark inclined his head. Yes, I trained under the Void Cult. Lalatina's eyes flicked to him. Then you must know Senior Sonia. Of course, Tony replied smoothly. Sonia runs the Void Cult. Before coming here, I asked her to recommend candidates for this job, Lalatina continued. She told me tastes differ too much, so I should see for myself. That's why I'm here. Yet your so-called celebrity hotel feels oddly unwelcoming. Tony let out a soft chuckle, finally revealing the frustration he'd been holding back. I hope you won't take this the wrong way, Miss Lalatina, he said. But I think I know why the other guests have been so reserved around you. It all comes down to appearances. Our typical clientele is made up of billionaires and influential dignitaries, people who dress to be noticed. They arrive in gleaming limousines, fighter jets, sometimes even warships. In their world, subtlety doesn't impress. And frankly, the material you're wearing, I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't even hail from Xandar. It looks more like something from a backwater planet, Damien said with a teasing lift of his brow. Lalatina covered her mouth, a soft smile playing on her lips. That's exactly why most guests aren't exactly thrilled to see me, she replied. Damien's smile widened. Then why did you come over to talk to me? Her smile grew warmer. Because you're Damien Sinclair, and quite handsome to boot. She paused, inclining her head with practiced poise. Besides, offering our distinguished guests the finest service is what makes Celebrity Hotel renowned. Damien leaned back, clearly amused. I take it the ladies at Celebrity Hotel are well-versed in flattery. Flattery? I prefer to think of it as honesty, Lalatina answered, her eyes dancing. He shook his head, still smiling. Honesty is a rare talent these days. Lalatina let her smile linger. I must admit, I didn't expect Mr. Sinclair to look so young, barely 20-something, yet already making waves. Damien shrugged modestly. I get that a lot. Lalatina's expression softened into genuine admiration. Promise and potential, you have both in spades. Tony Stark had built his empire and earned a reputation as a leading arms dealer on his own genius, amassing a billionaire's fortune while still in his 20s. So when Lalatina mentioned her own age, he smiled wryly. You're in your 20s? Young? I haven't heard that word in a long time. Lalatina tilted her head, puzzled. What do you mean by that, Mr. Stark? Nothing in particular, he replied, shaking his head. I just appreciate your perspective. Please, do go on. Though Tony wasn't about to reveal everything on his mind, he made it clear that her words had struck a chord. Sensing there was no deeper discussion to be had, Lalatina let the matter drop. By the way, she said, what are the normal operating hours of your celebrity hotel? And is there anything special I need to know as a guest? Tony led her through the sliding doors and into Villa No. 6666. Its classical architecture and elegant interiors perfectly mirrored Lalatina's own dignified grace, and the meticulously landscaped grounds only added to the sense of refined luxury. Here at the Celebrity Hotel, our services operate around the clock, Lalatina explained with a polite nod. You can call on us anytime, day or night. The only service we don't provide is personal attendance in private bedchambers. Aside from that, we'll do everything in our power to meet your needs. Tony's eyebrows shot up in surprise. 24-hour service? Don't you ever take a break? A soft smile curved Lalatina's lips. Our schedule simply mirrors the guests. When they rest, so do we. Tony chuckled, shaking his head. That sounds almost too ideal, like a nightmare for any capitalist. Yet I can't argue with success. It's precisely why Miss Sonia was so able here. He paused, his tone turning wistful. Though she really was one in a million. Before her retirement, she left the Celebrity Hotel to accompany Mr. Damien. Damien followed Tony Stark into the gleaming lobby of the Grand Celebrity Hotel. Towering marble columns framed a reception desk behind which stood a woman in a perfectly tailored black suit. She offered a warm, confident smile. My name is Sonia Cassidy, she announced as they drew near. I've managed these private villas for 10 years, and every year I'm voted the most popular villa manager in this hotel. Lalatina, standing to Damien's side, applauded softly. Her professionalism and dedication are unparalleled. That's exactly the standard we should emulate. Tony gave a curt nod of approval, and Damien couldn't help but smile inwardly. He'd been right to recommend Sonia as Tony's personal housekeeper. No one else combined competence and poise so perfectly. Sonia turned back to Tony. Your suite is ready, Mr. Stark. But first, may I offer you something to drink? We have a superb selection of cocktails, fine wines, even aged single malts. Wine sounds great, Tony said, scanning the lobby as though sizing up new tech. Then, catching Lalatina's playful glance, he smirked. And perhaps something a bit more entertaining for the evening? Lalatina laughed softly. I was just thinking the same thing. Can you arrange a beautiful companion for dinner? Sonia's expression remained impeccably professional. Certainly. It's only natural to appreciate beauty. Please excuse me for a moment. She tapped a tablet on the desk, and a holographic display sprang to life above it, showing portraits and brief profiles of the hotel's finest hostesses. All our ladies are here, exactly as you see them, Sonia explained. Feel free to browse. I'll have your wine ready in the meantime. Tony studied the floating images for a moment, his eyes narrowing with amusement. Damien watched the display too, the soft glow illuminating each elegant face. Around them, the lobby bustled quietly, an orchestra of hushed voices and clinking glasses. Yet in that instant, all their attention fixed on the possibilities the night might hold. Lalatina smiled as Damien, still rubbing his temples, finally found his voice. They should satisfy you, she said, tapping the slender bracelet on her left wrist. Instantly, a soft, bluish hologram shimmered to life above her hand. With a few more graceful gestures, she scrolled through the display until a comprehensive list settled into view. Names, races, titles, personalities, physical descriptions, even precise body measurements, all neatly organized. Damien's eyes widened. Miss Sonia wasn't kidding, he said, awe in his voice. I come all this way to Xandar, and I get exactly what I was promised. He leaned forward, inspecting each entry. He recognized a thrill that reminded him of nights spent chasing strangers back on Blue Star. But here, on Xandar, every encounter carried an air of the unknown. Better to study the options first than leap straight into the unfamiliar. Lalatina watched him, amusement dancing in her eyes. Damien let out a small laugh. A mechanical shapeshifter? He murmured, pointing to one startling entry. It can adopt different faces, personalities, even voices. Incredible. From a research standpoint alone, it's priceless. He tapped another name, And there are beauties from dozens of planets, not just Xandar. Sonia really outdid herself. Damien's gaze hardened with playful determination. When Banner and the others arrive, they'll get the full Xandarian experience. He turned back to Lalatina. Thank you for the introduction. I'll take it from here. With that, he nodded confidently, and already, in his mind, he was planning how best to enjoy the galaxy's most dazzling delights. Damien's tirade blossomed into a riot of profanity, vibrant, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Yet Lalatina's expression never wavered. At first, witnessing such an unrestrained outburst from a male customer might have made her uneasy, but more than 5 years behind the counter had toughened her nerves. Sure enough, almost before she'd taken a breath, a third volley of insults tumbled from Damien's lips. Chapter 228, I Just Need a Secretary. Damien would never forget his friends whenever he was determined to have a good time. As for Renaud and the others, there was no need to worry. They knew Xandar inside and out and had already discovered every possible thrill the planet could offer. Damien couldn't believe they hadn't brought him along sooner, and he resolved to have a long, hard talk with Renaud and Kyle when he got back to Void Island. With that plan in mind, he checked into the Celebrity Hotel. A month slipped by in the blur of extravagant banquets, top-shelf spirits, and an ever-changing parade of stunning companions. Damien threw himself into every indulgence, sampling exotic cocktails, trying out the hottest nightclubs, and exploring the more unconventional pleasures Xandar was famous for. After 18 months of dutiful restraint by Pepper's side on Blue Star, this was exactly the release he needed. His old anxieties and frustrations melted away in the glow of neon lights and ceaseless laughter. But as the 30th morning dawned, Damien felt a sobering clarity. If he didn't pull himself together, he'd drown in this gilded fantasia and emerge a hollow shell, ruined by excess. He'd come here to unwind, but now it was time to work. No more late nights chasing one fleeting thrill after another. Tomorrow, he told himself, he'd start making plans, and he'd need the right people to see them through. First on the list, a secretary. Even if Sonia hadn't reminded him that Void Island's coffers were running low, Damien knew he couldn't afford to slack off. An unknown enemy would strike Earth in a few years, and he already had a hunch who it might be. As he'd pointed out before, the Chitauri would never dare attack without the backing of a powerhouse, someone unafraid to challenge the God King Odin. That meant this new foe would likely be on par with Odin himself, or at least not far behind. Damien had never faced Odin in person, so he had no first-hand measure of his strength. But anyone could see from the destroyer Odin constructed that this was an opponent he couldn't count on defeating lightly. The destroyer's raw power seemed at least double his own, if not more. At exactly noon, Lalatina arrived at the villa, carrying Damien's lunch on a polished silver tray. She found him stirring awake in his study and asked in her gentle voice, "Mr. Damien, do you have any plans for today?" Serving Damien was simple. He was here by choice, wanting nothing more than 3 well-prepared meals a day and a quiet place to work. Aside from overseeing breakfast, lunch, and dinner, he had no special requests. Chapter 7. A Farewell in the Suite. Damien stood in the soft morning light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Celebrity Hotel suite. He draped a crisp white shirt over his broad shoulders, the fabric settling comfortably against his skin. All around him, lavish trappings hinted at the life of indulgence he'd built for his high-end clients and for himself. Until today, he'd spent his time entertaining one beauty after another, but now his focus was on Lalatina. She hovered by the minibar, absently stirring the last dregs of her espresso, her posture tense. Damien caught her eye in the mirror and nodded gently. "You're leaving today," he ventured, smoothing the front of his shirt. "I'll cancel the rest of the arrangements." Lalatina's gaze dropped to her cup, as if it had suddenly become fascinating. "Yes." She paused, then looked up, concern flickering in her amber eyes. "Am I disappointing you?" He paused a moment, surprised. "Disappointing?" "No." Damien crossed the suite, setting his drink aside. "Why would you think that?" She offered a small, rueful smile. "I've been having a wonderful time. Your service has been impeccable. It's just, this kind of luxury can be dangerously addictive. I can't afford to stay in decadence forever. I have work waiting for me." He nodded, understanding. Over the past week, the rigors of her research had faded beneath massages, gourmet meals, and whispered conversation, in silk sheets. But Lalatina was a scholar first, and she was right to return to her responsibilities. "I'll miss having you here," he admitted, "but you should focus on what truly matters to you." Lalatina stood and gathered her belongings, her resolve firming. "I might come back now and then, when time allows, but I can't say for certain." She pressed a slim envelope into his hand. "The fee is non-refundable, so consider it an open invitation." Damien looked down at the envelope, then back at her. Relief softened his features, and he offered a warm smile. "Thank you. I'll hold you to that." With a final nod, Lalatina swept out of the suite, leaving Damien alone amid the remnants of an overindulgent weekend. He leaned against the marble countertop, the envelope heavy in his palm, and allowed himself a moment to savor the memory of her laughter. Then he straightened, ready to prepare the suite for its next guest, always hoping she'd walk back through that door. "It's practically next door if you want to return to Void Island," Tony said, slipping on his jacket. "You could head over any time this evening." Lalatina forced a thin smile. He'd just offered her nearly a year's paid leave, an unheard-of luxury, yet she felt anything but relieved. "Thank you," she managed, her voice a little tight. "I'd be thrilled to get 10 days, or even a month off, but a full year?" Tony paused in front of her, brow furrowed. Even paid leave can backfire when you're used to non-stop, high-intensity work. People get too relaxed and it becomes a struggle to dive back in. He shrugged. In the celebrity hotel world, villa managers almost never take that kind of break. Lalatina let out a bitter chuckle. "I know exactly what you mean. At first, everyone's envious. A year off with full pay. But more often than not, they come back after 3 months, bored out of their minds and desperate to start over." Damien paced the length of the lobby, frowning at the fading, "now hiring" sign in the window. Service quality had nosedived ever since the remaining staff got used to shorter hours and longer breaks. Take too much time off, and they simply handed in their resignations. He stopped beside the front desk, where Lalatina watched him with worried eyes. "What are we going to do?" Damien asked, rubbing his temples. "If the team keeps quitting every time they hit a little downtime, this place will collapse." Lalatina bit her lip. "We could ask you to sleep here every night, sir," she ventured, "but that would make your research impossible." He gave her a wry smile. She was right. Spending every evening supervising the desk would derail his work in the lab. "I know my projects matter," he said, "but without someone to manage day-to-day operations, the inn won't last the week." Lalatina drew herself up, determination lighting her face. "Then give me a refund for the time I've already lost," she declared. "And take me with you. I'm still young. I plan to work here a few more years, save up, and retire comfortably like the others. If you won't come often enough to keep the place running, let me serve you directly." Damien stopped mid-stride. "You're serious?" he asked, astonished by her boldness. "Absolutely," Lalatina replied, meeting his gaze. "Can I come with you?" He studied her for a moment, the fierce resolve, the hopeful glint in her eyes, and at last he nodded. "All right," he said, a reluctant smile breaking through. "Show me what you can do. We'll see if this plan works." "You've already paid your fee. Your time here isn't up yet," Damien reminded them. Lalatina glanced at him. "True, you can't leave Xandar on your own, but you can travel with me." Damien hesitated. "My duties are strictly defined by my contract. I can only operate within that scope." Lalatina's lips curved into a smile. "Perfect. I've been searching for a reliable secretary. Come with me to Void Island." Tony Stark, standing nearby, considered her offer. His previous secretary had resigned to return to Blue Star, and he'd yet to find a replacement. Damien's scientalism, though limited to formal duties, not personal errands, made him an ideal candidate. "All right," Tony said at last. "Just give me a moment. I need to draw up the paperwork." "I'll file the report immediately," Damien replied, tapping commands into his datapad. Lalatina gave a brief nod. "Don't worry about safety. Senior Sonia is stationed on Void Island, and the celebrity hotel owner will track your location. You'll check in with them regularly." With the agreement sealed and plans in motion, Damien prepared to depart for Void Island as Lalatina's new secretary. If Damien ever failed to check in on schedule, or if anything went wrong, the owner of the celebrity hotel would be the first to notice. Xandar's regulations were famously strict, and only the most respected figures could secure a long-term residency at such a prestigious establishment. In other words, there was virtually no danger to worry about. Satisfied, Damien hit send on his fourth update. Chapter 229, The Right Path. Damien didn't know much about the formalities, but since Lalatina said she could accompany him once she'd finished the paperwork, he didn't mind waiting. It wouldn't take more than 10 minutes. Lalatina sat down and carefully completed the form, detailing how long she'd be away and where she was headed. When she was done, she stood up, carrying several suitcases. "You've brought quite a bit," Damien observed. She smiled. "It's no problem to have it shipped by air, so don't worry." Damien shook his head. "Air freight is too much of a hassle. I'll just have someone pick it up directly." He straightened and called, "Jarvis." A smooth, pleasant male voice answered from the villa's speakers. Jarvis had been monitoring Damien ever since his arrival at the Celebrity Hotel. "At your service, sir." "Please arrange ground transport," Damien said. "Have a vehicle meet us on the tarmac in about 10 minutes. We'll depart straight from here." "Right away, sir," Jarvis replied. Damien froze at the familiar voice, his pulse racing as he whirled around to locate its source. Without waiting for an answer, Tony Stark called over his shoulder, "Let's head straight to the tarmac," and strode toward the plane's boarding ladder. Damien snatched up his overnight bag and hurried after him. In the villa's lobby, the manager and the other hostesses watched in stunned silence as Damien saluted Tony Stark and marched out. Only moments ago, Damien had spoken of his lofty standards and unflagging dedication to this work. Everyone assumed he'd stay on duty no matter what. Now, seeing him abandon his post mid-shift, they exchanged puzzled, slightly contemptuous glances. Their stares felt like 1,000 tiny thorns. Standing just outside the sliding doors, Damien felt the sting of their judgment. He thought back to how, over the past year, the romance of his profession had given way to lean, dispiriting reality. He knew he couldn't simply walk away and expect to return to the same mindset after a break. His motivation would crumble. He had two choices: request a full cancellation fee and remain on standby at the villa, or climb aboard Tony's jet and continue serving him directly. Damien drew in a steadying breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped onto the tarmac, ready to present his proposal to Mr. Stark. Damien had agreed to work under Tony Stark for 1 year. Once his term ended, he could return to the Celebrity Hotel and pick up his old duties. Lalatina noticed the envious glances the others kept darting his way, but she also knew that some reassurances were wasted words. "Keep your head up," she murmured. "What are you afraid of?" "Don't worry about anyone else's opinion," she added softly. "Even if they wanted Tony's favor, they'd never get it. You should feel proud to have this chance, not ashamed." Damien felt the weight of their stares and caught Lalatina's reluctant glance before she dropped her eyes. He leveled a cool look around the room. The moment he spoke, the whispers faded. Lalatina might not have been the warmest person, but none of them dared show disrespect in front of Tony Stark, Xandar's youngest, most famous arms dealer outside the official military. Brilliant, strikingly handsome, and a member of the secretive Void cult, Stark was an ally worth impressing. Damien inclined his head in a formal bow. "Thank you, Mr. Stark." "Tony, count me in." The instant Lalatina spoke, she sensed her colleagues shrinking away, unwilling to meet her eyes. She knew they'd be whispering about her behind closed doors, yet she forced a grateful smile. Moments later, Tony escorted her out to the flight apron. A sleek space fighter banked in from above and hovered precisely 50 meters away. With a casual wave, Tony guided Lalatina aboard, and under the curious gazes of her peers, the fighter rocketed skyward. Inside the cockpit, Lalatina's brow furrowed. There was no pilot at the controls, yet the ship flew as smoothly as if guided by the hand of an expert. Before she could call out, a calm, mechanical voice spoke. "Good afternoon, Miss Lalatina. I am Jarvis, the artificial intelligence Tony created. I'm in full control of this craft. There's no need for surprise." Lalatina's wide-eyed stare gave her unease away. Anticipating her questions, Jarvis added, "I monitor all systems in real time. If you experience any discomfort, let me know, and I can adjust environmental settings immediately." "Jarvis?" Lalatina whispered, gathering her wits. She cast a cautious glance around the cockpit, then met the AI's reassuring tone. I won't be alarmed. Void Island will show you things that both amaze and unnerve you, Tony said with a casual shrug. If you want the full picture, head to the Record Temple and ask Miss Sarah about the island's situation. Lalatina's brow furrowed. Miss Sarah? Tony nodded. She came here first from the Celebrity Hotel, so she's technically your senior. She spends most days studying the island's records or sampling its cuisine, which leaves her plenty of time to talk. Just pay her a visit. Lalatina brightened instantly, excitement dancing in her eyes. Jarvis, let's go to the Record Temple and have Miss Sarah explain all the rules of the island. Tony couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. Sounds like a plan. Jarvis raised his chin in salute. Right away. Chapter 7, A Drop at the Temple. Tony's heavily modified interceptor sliced through the void between Xandar City and Void Island in mere minutes. The 200-kilometer hop was normally a non-event, yet today Tony chose to touch down not on the maintenance apron, but on the main avenue leading to the Temple of Records. He wanted Lalatina to find it at a glance. He cut the engine, killed the thrusters, and turned to her. Go on up to that temple, he said, nodding toward the marble spires 100 meters away. Ask for Miss Sarah. Once she meets you, she'll escort you to my lab. Lalatina bowed her head. Understood. She gathered her skirts and stepped off the ramp, her eyes fixed on the sanctified facade. Tony watched her glide toward the temple before climbing back into the cockpit. As the interceptor's hatch closed, he allowed himself a small grin. The last time he'd been at the Celebrity Hotel, he'd picked up more than just gossip. It looked like his plan was already in motion. High atop the mountain villa, Damien glanced up from the battle reports on his console, surprise flickering across his face. Tony, his ace pilot and friend, had just walked in, accompanied by a woman so striking she almost outshone the dawn. Tony, who's your friend? Damien asked, rising from his chair. The intruder's eyes, the color of midnight, met Damien's with calm courtesy. She offered a slight nod. Before Tony could answer, Sonia, lounging on the chaise by the window and scrolling through the comlink, finally looked up. You two back already? I was just reading intel on a rogue cryptogram discovered at the Temple of Records. Damien frowned. You mean the same temple Tony dropped Lalatina at? Yes, Sonia replied, setting her tablet aside. The code's supposed to reveal a hidden research vault. If Lalatina finds Sarah, she'll be led straight to Tony's lab. That's no accident. Tony shrugged. I needed someone discreet enough to access the temple archives without raising alarms. Lalatina fit the bill. Damien folded his arms, studying the newcomer. And what do we call you? She smiled, the faintest curve of amusement in her eyes. Lalatina, she replied in a smooth voice. I look forward to working with you and to seeing Tony's lab for myself. Sonia hopped off the chaise, already brimming with questions. Tony simply reached into his jacket and withdrew a data crystal. Here's everything she'll need, he said. Let's get to work. Outside, the first rays of sunlight bathed Void Island in gold. Inside the villa, a new chapter of their adventure had just begun. Cassidon tilted his head, curiosity flickering in his dark eyes. Tony just returned from the Celebrity Hotel with a stunning woman. Damien's interest immediately sharpened. Is that so? And she's on her way to the Temple of Records to look for Sarah? He leaned back against the cool stone wall, a small smile playing at his lips. In his mind, this was welcome news. The men-to-women ratio on the island had swung wildly in one direction, and a striking newcomer could only help restore some balance and boost everyone's spirits in the process. I'm going to pay her a visit, Damien announced, rising to his feet. Beside him, Sonia's expression darkened with concern. The mention of a mysterious beauty arriving at the Temple of Records set her nerves on edge. She exchanged a quick glance with Damien, then tightened the strap of her satchel. I'll come with you, she said, voice firm. With that, the two of them slipped out of the hall, determined to uncover exactly who Tony had brought back, and what secrets this woman might hold. Chapter 230, Can You Relate? After Tony sent JRVS back to the lab, he made his way up the winding drive to the mountaintop villa. As soon as Damien caught sight of him, he greeted him with a wry smile. You're back, Damien said. How was your month at that celebrity resort? Tony shrugged off his jacket and planted himself on the sofa. Honestly, It was fantastic, but I was on the verge of becoming a full-time lounger if I'd stayed any longer. So I figured I'd come home, reset my head, and get back to work. Damien nodded approvingly. Next time, I'm dragging Banner and Steve along. Let them see what it's like to be outsiders for a while, get a taste of something different. Tony laughed. I shouldn't be surprised you guessed my destination, but you're right. A vacation is only half as fun if you do it alone. It's the late-night talks, the shared stories. That's when you really connect and find friends who matter. Damien leaned back in his chair, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. You have such a generous heart. Banner will be thrilled. Tony Stark chuckled, clearly satisfied. He hasn't had anything like this in years. I just know Banner's been craving a proper outlet, Damien continued. Once he masters control over the Hulk, I'll take him there myself. Tony nodded emphatically. Exactly. Damien glanced toward the doorway. By the way, where's Miss Sonia? Tony swept the hallway with his eyes. She stepped out for a bit. Had something to handle. Damien shrugged. She's always busy. At that, Tony's expression shifted. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a near whisper. Damien, I've got something I need to run by you. Damien noticed the relief on Tony's face. He clearly didn't want Sonia overhearing. He held up a hand. Go ahead. Tony glanced around once more, then spoke quietly. I prepaid a full year at the Celebrity Hotel. After only a month's stay, I'm almost out of credit. Sonia's tied up right now, and I'd rather not bother her again. Think you could help me extend the reservation? Damien's grin widened. Consider it done. I'll talk to Banner tonight. Tony's eyes lit up. You're a lifesaver, Damien. Just don't make a habit of draining my social connections next time, Damien teased. Tony laughed, the tension between them dissolving. No promises, but I'll try. I'm going to pause my membership for a while when I return, Tony Stark announced. Damien raised an eyebrow. That leaves 11 months of paid service unclaimed. You could consider it a sort of holiday for her. Tony shook his head. She actually asked me for a refund, said a pause would hurt her more than help. But honestly, I'm furious. Who do you think I am? Tony Stark. Do I need to quibble over a few measly dollars? He leaned back, adopting an exaggeratedly pained expression. And let's be clear, I have zero complaints about the service. In fact, I'm more than satisfied. So even if she can't use it, I'm not giving her a refund. You see where I'm coming from? Tony asked, turning to Damien. Under his mask, Damien's lips twitched with suppressed laughter, but he maintained a solemn nod. If the service is satisfactory, there's no logical basis for a refund. Tony leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, and offered a proposal. She said there's another way. She could work for me. 11 months on the job would cover her room and board completely, and when that's done, she can leave without a worry. Damien raised an eyebrow. Go on. The secretary you found for me last time was competent, but let's be honest, her looks were only so-so. I just returned and realized I'm short a secretary who can handle the work and represent me well. This woman has both the skills and the appearance. Tony paused to gauge Damien's reaction. So I want to bring her out to Void Island and keep her there for a while. What do you think? Damien's smile told Tony all he needed to know. Seizing the moment, Tony pushed a little further. That's why you brought her back here in the first place, right? Chuckling, Damien leaned forward. Yes, but since she's already here, may I formally request that I take her on as my secretary? Tony's tension dissolved into relief, a broad grin spreading across his face. As long as you agree, consider it done. Damien nodded. It's settled, then. Tony let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thank you. Damien shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. No, I promise you, she just arrived a few minutes ago. Tony raised an eyebrow. And you're not planning to send her away? I wouldn't, Damien replied calmly. We're not the only Void Cult members on this island. There are plenty of ordinary people here, too. They're no threat. Besides, Sonia went out to meet her personally. She wanted to size her up and learn what she could. Since you're open to talking this through, there's really no reason to turn her away. Tony crossed his arms, clearly unconvinced. So why didn't you tell me earlier? Damien shrugged. I was trying to figure out the best way to bring it up. Frustration flashed across Tony's face. You could have just said that when you arrived. Instead, you told me there was something you wanted to discuss, and left it at that. How am I supposed to know what's on your mind? Damien spread his hands in a gesture of peace. Look, believe me or not, I'm not kicking her out. That should be enough. Tony hesitated for a moment, then let out a slow sigh. The outcome was better than he'd feared. He decided it wasn't worth pushing the issue further, and decided to trust Damien's judgment, for now. Don't say I didn't warn you. Watch your back around Pepper. Damien offered a lopsided grin. Why worry about Pepper? I've never even had a one-night stand with her. Tony bowed his head in mock deference. All I'm saying is, if you ever decide to enjoy the perks of a celebrity hotel, make sure Pepper never finds out. As long as she's clueless, she can't cause any trouble. Got it? Now go handle your affairs. Damien shook his head, amused by Tony's earnestness. Whether Tony was genuinely worried or just putting on a show didn't matter. Pepper would uncover the truth soon enough, and by then, any fallout wouldn't be his problem. Understood. With Damien's permission secured, Tony had already made arrangements to have Lalatina stay on Void Island for the time being. Satisfied, he stood, gave a quick nod, and exited through the main doors. A few moments later, Sonia arrived at the Temple of Records. As she stepped into the grand hall, her gaze was drawn to a familiar figure, long chestnut hair cascading down a dignified back, the woman studying the archives with quiet intensity. Lalatina? She called, uncertainty lacing her tone. Miss Sonia? Lalatina had been deep in conversation with Sarah when a familiar voice called her name. She turned, recognized the speaker, and beamed. What promise did you get out of Mr. Tony? Sonia's eyes widened in surprise. Realizing it truly was Lalatina, she hurried over, cheeks flushing. She'd never expected that the gorgeous woman Mr. Cassadine said Mr. Tony had brought back would turn out to be Lalatina herself. Now, on this 27th day, Sonia was determined to express her gratitude and properly thank Lalatina for her help. Chapter 231, Asking for Help in the Toughest Tone. Mr. Tony didn't impose any conditions, Damien explained, shaking his head. He just still owes me 11 months' worth of room rent. I wanted to take a proper vacation, though honestly, a year off might turn me into a total slacker, so I asked him for a refund. Instead, he offered me a job managing his daily affairs and running various errands. He says that after 11 months here, I'm free to return to the celebrity hotel. Senior Sonia, I swear nothing else happened. Lalatina, who clearly understood what Senior Sonia had been implying, gave a reassuring smile and brushed the rumors aside in a voice as soft and gentle as a spring breeze. Having already learned a few of Void Island's unfriendly rules from Senior Sarah, she too realized that this place was far too dangerous for most ordinary people to navigate alone. All right then, Lalatina said. Until you find your footing, you can move in with Sarah. Her residence is just down the way from Mr. Tony's laboratory. That way, you'll have someone to travel with to and from work, and a friendly face waiting at home. Hearing this, Sonia's brow furrowed. She couldn't shake her concern about throwing Damien into the orbit of Mr. Tony, his unpredictable experiments, his eccentric demands. Still, with few better options available, she reluctantly nodded. It might be the safest stopgap they could arrange for now. Mr. Tony flatly refused the refund. Damien nodded in understanding and said, All right, I finish work late every day and never get to go out. I'm worried I'll be stuck at home with no one to keep me company. At hearing that, Sarah brightened immediately. She was delighted to have someone to spend time with. Sonia looked youthful and charming. Sarah herself was sexy and glamorous, and Damien carried a dignified, graceful air that made him seem older than his years. In truth, he was the youngest of the three, only 20. Because of the age difference, there hadn't been any real rivalry among them at the celebrity hotel. Damien turned back to Mr. Tony. Sir, if you've already spoken with Sarah, could you ask her to bring me along to her laboratory? He felt a flutter of excitement at the thought, yet he didn't dare assume Mr. Tony would agree so easily. After all, he'd be staying at this celebrity hotel for an entire month, and by now he'd seen enough of Tony's character to know he needn't worry about being mistreated. Damien paused at the entrance to the Temple of Records, listening as Sonia and Lalatina discussed their next move. Although Mr. Tony had a reputation for extravagance, those who'd worked with him praised his warm, easygoing nature. He would never coerce a woman into anything against her will, no typical tyrant behavior here. His personal code stressed respect and genuine care, a sharp contrast to the kind of rich scions who assumed money made the world revolve around them. "That settles it," Sonia said, turning to Damien. "I'm coming with you to speak with Mr. Tony and finalize the arrangements." Damien nodded. "Good idea. Let's head over now." Sonia hesitated for a moment and then glanced back into the temple. "Sarah-senpai, you're the only attendant on duty here. Are you sure you can manage alone?" Sarah shrugged. "Don't worry about the place. It's quieter than it looks. But if someone walks in," Sonia began. Lalatina, who'd been standing silently by the ledger, furrowed her brow. "Wait, really? You just leave the records unsupervised?" Sarah smiled and reached for a fresh sheet of parchment. "It's fine. I'll post a short notice." In just a few deft strokes, she wrote, "Temporarily away, records under supervision, back shortly." She laid the notice prominently on the long oak table. "There, that'll cover any visitors." Sonia and Damien exchanged relieved glances. Lalatina's confusion melted into reluctant acceptance. "All right then, lead the way." With that, the four of them, Damien, Sonia, Lalatina, and Sarah, stepped out of the Temple of Records and set off toward Mr. Tony's estate, each quietly wondering what surprises awaited them there. Damien had been stationed on Void Island for over a month now and was completely at ease with its strange rhythms. Some days he'd sit in the Temple of Records from dawn till dusk without a single mission briefing to process. Given that, he had no quarrel with Senior Sonia when she allowed Sarah to punch out early. After all, the sign Sarah left on the temple door said it all. "I'm on my way to billionaire Tony Stark's lab. If you need me, just follow the marked route to his facility." Damien raised an eyebrow as he read it. Void Island's protocols weren't nearly as tight as those clamped down on celebrity enclaves elsewhere. Once Sarah was comfortable in her role, she didn't have to remain tethered to the records desk all day. "You'll get used to it," Sonia said with a small smile, noting Damien's curiosity. "Once the routine sinks in, no one expects you to be glued to the temple." Sarah grabbed her satchel and stood, stretching. "All right, let's go see Mr. Stark. Come on, Damien." Before he knew it, Damien was being led off by Sonia and Sarah through a maze of winding cobblestone paths. All around them, powered individuals, heroes in sleek armor, people with glowing runic tattoos, and a few muttering experimental gadgets, mingled or hurried to their own appointments. Whenever Damien spotted someone noteworthy, he pointed them out in a low voice, and Sonia or Sarah would nod appreciatively, sharing a brief aside about each person's abilities or reputation. By the time they reached the gleaming steel and glass entrance to Stark's lab, Damien felt more a part of Void Island than he had when he first arrived. With Sarah's signpost as their guide, he was ready for whatever the world's most famous genius had in store. Damien walked beside Sonia and Sarah through the grand hotel lobby, and he couldn't help but notice how differently they were received. The moment Sonia entered, every influential figure in the room lowered their gaze and bowed with palpable reverence, their voices hushed and respectful. Seconds later, when Sarah appeared at Sonia's side, those same men swapped deferential bows for friendly smiles and easy waves, as though greeting a longtime companion. Trailing just behind them, Lalatina fidgeted nervously. Damien glanced back at her, curiosity flickering in his eyes. He studied her for a moment, quiet, tense, but said nothing. "It's like being Sonia Senpai's shadow," Lalatina whispered to Sarah once they'd cleared the main crowd. "Everywhere she goes, people swarm around her like moths to a flame." Sarah reached out and squeezed Lalatina's arm reassuringly. "Relax," she said with a gentle smile. "They're here for Sonia. We're simply along for the ride." Lalatina bit her lip and nodded, though her fingers still trembled. Damien fell in step beside her, offering silent support with a slight, encouraging nod. Sonia paused to check her phone. The group chat she belonged to had erupted in activity. Scrolling through the flood of messages, she read aloud, "Someone's asking, who is that dignified, intellectual woman walking with Miss Sonia and Miss Sarah?" Damien peered over her shoulder as the screen lit up with guesses and rumors. Then a new message popped up from billionaire Tony Stark. "She's been staying at the Celebrity Hotel for the past month. I just escorted her back." Damien and the others exchanged puzzled looks. Who was this mysterious woman, and why had her return set so many tongues wagging? As they continued deeper into the lobby, Heads turned at every step, whispers growing louder with each passing guest. Damien kept his expression calm, but inside, questions raced. Tonight would be long before they figured out what or who had everyone talking. "Isn't it incredible?" Tony grinned, tipping his sunglasses up onto his head. Kyle folded his arms, eyebrows raised. "Incredible? Tony, you've been off diving for a month, never once on the island. I thought you'd left Xandar for Blue Star. Turns out you've been holed up enough. Had Celebrity Hotel this whole time, and I didn't even get a call." Tony chuckled. "Secretly? Come on. I've been active in our group chat every day. Why wouldn't I share what I'm up to?" Kyle shook his head. "You're from Xandar, Tony. You should have told me about this place. The Celebrity Hotel looks amazing, but you said nothing, left me out of the loop entirely." "I didn't think you'd care," Tony shrugged. "Besides, it's not exactly cheap." Kyle's eyes widened. "Not cheap? Dude, rooms start at 10,000 yuan a night. If you want the deluxe experience, it can go up to 200,000 yuan per night." 200,000? Tony echoed, feigning shock. Then he laughed. "Well, that's the price of luxury." Damien was just finishing the final tweaks on the predictive algorithm when Tony slipped back into the lab, a broad grin on his face. On a nearby stool, Hercules Kyle was hunched over his tablet, frowning as he scrolled through the community feed. "Not everyone makes money as easily as you do, Tony," Kyle complained, voice thick with envy. Tony laughed, the sound echoing off the lab's stainless steel walls. "Ah, yes, the perks of the rich," he teased. "Honestly, if you'd mentioned wanting in sooner, I'd have brought you along." Kyle shot him a glare. "I didn't even ask you to." Tony merely shrugged, already tapping out a reply on his phone. "Well, now that I know you're interested, I'll include you next time." From the corner of the room, the predictor, nicknamed the Prophet by the rest of the team, shifted uncomfortably. He cleared his throat. And don't forget about me either, okay?" Kyle glared at the Prophet, then back at Tony. "See? I'm not the only one who feels left out." Tony looked up at Damien, still grinning. "Second update's live," he announced. "Check the forum." Damien nodded and pulled up the feed on his console. The rest of the team gathered behind him, eyes fixed on Tony's newly posted status report as the lab hummed with renewed excitement. Chapter 232, Too Many Men and Too Few Women. Sarah and Lalatina stared in surprise as Sonia's communicator projected the busy community feed from Void Island. "Wow," Sarah exclaimed. "There really are far more men than women here, and judging by how freely Tony interacts, his open-hearted style makes perfect sense." Sonia, feeling their eyes on her, cleared her throat and cut the projection. "With so few women, myself included, most of us only read the messages and rarely post," she explained. "The men have assumed we've blocked them, so they've let their guard down completely." Lalatina exchanged a knowing look with Sarah. Having managed luxury hotels for celebrities, they'd grown accustomed to watching the wealthy play with their fortunes, and they weren't surprised at the men's exuberant exchanges. "This is impressive," Sarah said. "The Void Cult's community really is remarkably harmonious." Lalatina smiled, recalling how she'd personally introduced these members to Tony Stark. If this was how smoothly things ran, she thought, there'd be nothing to worry about now that she was heading to the island. Lalatina watched in stunned silence as the men around her traded lurid boasts, each claiming he'd rescued women from celebrity hotels as though it were some mark of honor. She had no idea how to make sense of it, or why these super-strong warriors were so desperate to outdo one another in such a tawdry competition. She'd been under Mr. Tony's wing for only 11 months and had never pledged him her full loyalty, but she was powerless to object, so she didn't bother. "This is the first time I've ever seen their group chat," Lalatina murmured. Sarah, who'd been scrolling through the thread, nodded eagerly. "Is this exclusive to Void Cult members?" "If you're in the Void Cult, this is where everyone gathers," Sonia explained. "There are a handful of new recruits from Blue Star we haven't met yet, and those dozen or so zealots from Mowgli Star aren't here, but everyone else who's pledged has joined." Sonia's gaze drifted to the muted icon of Mr. Cassidon, who lurked in the chat but never uttered a word. She wondered what he was thinking, and whether he'd ever break his silence. Damien was living it up at the Celebrity Hotel, late-night parties, gourmet meals, anything he wanted. While Mr. Cassidine, by contrast, seemed to be having a rather dull stay. Sonia couldn't shake the thought that someone hadn't offered him the kind of personalized attention they usually did. She found Lalatina just outside the lounge, where the hostess rosters were tacked to the wall. Folding her arms, she asked, "Lalatina, did Damien ask you for a companion, or did you recommend one before he said anything?" Lalatina blinked in surprise. "He arrived less than 10 minutes ago, and right away wondered if we could arrange a lady. I simply showed him our best options." "That's not what happened," Sonia corrected her, voice low but firm. "He never asked." "He did," Lalatina insisted, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I only ever answer questions and offer information when a guest expresses interest." "That's exactly my point," Sonia said. "Our policy is clear. We disclose these services only if the guest requests them. Volunteering recommendations before someone even hints at it risks making them uncomfortable." Lalatina's brow furrowed in thought. "Isn't that how every branch of the celebrity hotel operates? I've been away for over 2 years. Maybe I missed a memo." Sonia's tone softened as she realized Lalatina was genuinely flustered. "I was just wondering why Mr. Moth Cassadine hadn't received the same courtesy. Now you know, if he didn't ask, we legally and ethically couldn't offer." Lalatina let out a breath, shoulders dropping in relief. Sonia couldn't help but smile, a faint pink blooming on her cheeks. "Well, I suppose my usual charm tactics didn't take," she admitted. "Either Mr. Cassadine is too refined or simply too reserved to accept a direct suggestion." They exchanged a knowing look, an unspoken acknowledgement that in their line of work, the smallest detail of discretion often made the biggest difference in a guest's experience. Sonia paused at the edge of the courtyard, watching Damien Cassadine stride ahead with his usual cool detachment. She'd always thought of him as a man who admired strong women, so why did he never once seem to notice her? Whenever her gaze met his, he simply offered a quick glance and then looked away, as if nothing about her attire or composure could make him pause. At first, Sonia blamed herself. Maybe she wasn't dressed boldly enough, or maybe she came on too strong. But now another, more unsettling thought had crept in. What if Damien wasn't interested in women at all? Embarrassment flushed her cheeks. She could handle disagreements, rivalries, even a bruised ego, but a question of sexual orientation felt unbridgeable. She steeled herself, determined not to jump to conclusions. For now, it was only a hunch, a challenge to be tested rather than a verdict. If she wanted answers, she'd have to orchestrate them, gently probing Damien's reactions until she'd gathered enough clues to know the truth. Shaking off her uncertainty, Sonia set her jaw and followed the others toward the cluster of white buildings ahead. Tony's research complex sprawled across the hillside, its gleaming domes and interconnected pavilions giving it the air of a small, clandestine city. Beside her, Lalatina craned her neck to take in the view. "This is Tony's lab?" she asked, eyes wide. "It's enormous." Sonia managed a tight smile. "Bigger than anyone expected. Come on, we've got work to do." With that, they stepped through the main gate and into Tony's hidden world, each of them caught up in their own private agendas. Damien had seen laboratories before, but he'd never walked into one this vast. With rows of gleaming equipment stretching down endless corridors and clusters of high-tech workstations clustered behind glass walls, it felt less like a lab and more like an entire research campus. Sonia, who'd been leading him through the main entrance, smiled. "This facility is Mr. Tony's personal laboratory. Everything in here belongs to him." She gestured toward a polished steel doorway. "From now on, this will be your workspace. If Mr. Tony decides to keep you on permanently, I promise the perks will rival any 5-star hotel." Damien followed her through the door, his boots echoing on the floor. He tried to imagine his life here, what it would be like to live and work alongside Sarah in Tony's world. Ahead, Tony was finishing up a boastful status update in the group chat, with Kyle and the others chiming in. Suddenly, Jarvis's calm voice cut through the lab's ambient hum. "Mr. Tony, Miss Sonia has arrived." Tony's eyebrows shot up as he glanced at his phone. "Sonia already?" He tapped the screen, rereading his last message. "Did she come just to see me? Or maybe she's here because I said something a little blunt in the chat?" Jarvis replied almost instantly. "Perhaps she intends to warn you." Tony froze, guilt flickering across his face as he scrolled back through the conversation. He'd been a bit too candid about his recent achievements, and it looked like Sonia was here to keep him in line. He looked up at Damien and Sonia, took a deep breath, and stepped forward to greet them. The moment fell into a comfortable silence. None of the women in the group spoke up, but Tony knew Miss Sonia had been watching him. He'd seen her name pop up in the island's community forum, personally sponsoring several votes on new construction projects. That alone told him she was paying close attention to everything that happened here. "Ah, that explains it," Jarvis said, catching Tony's worried look and glancing at Sonia. "So you did all that," Tony exhaled. "I thought you were about to reprimand me for being too outspoken." Miss Sonia simply shook her head, her calm expression never wavering. "I'm not here to police your words, Tony. Besides, I came with Sarah and Lalatina. I know what's going on." Tony ran a hand through his hair. "You're right, Babley should have invited Lalatina along sooner. She'll be stationed here for a while, after all. She needs to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Jarvis nodded in understanding. "Glad that's settled, then." Hearing Jarvis put it so plainly, Tony felt all the tension drain out of his shoulders. Miss Sonia might downplay her role, insisting she was only the household manager, but it was precisely her humility that made everyone else relax in her presence. She never flaunted her influence, and that won her genuine respect from every member of the Void cult. Tony glanced at Sonia, then thought of Damien. He knew how much Sonia's quiet strength meant to him. Maybe it wasn't the highest priority in Damien's mind, but it was certainly more important than Tony had ever realized. "Could you please provide the full text of the chapter you'd like me to rewrite? Once I have the complete passage, I can polish it into coherent, idiomatic English and rename Harvey to Damien as requested." Chapter 233, Still Finding His Feet. Sonia led Lalatina and Sarah through the vast, gleaming halls of the laboratory. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the scale of Tony Stark's research facility. "I'd heard Lord Tony Stark was brilliant," she admitted, "but I never imagined his lab would be this enormous." Lalatina smiled. Master Cassadine himself vouched for Tony's genius in science and technology. From the moment Tony proposed his first invention, Cassadine pledged him unlimited resources. Sarah nodded, awestruck. "I suppose that explains it." "It does," Sonia agreed. "Most people on the island either build modest homes, live aboard the battleship, or head out on assignments. But Master Cassadine was determined to provide Tony with everything he needed, even if it meant dedicating nearly half the island to this one facility." She paused, glancing back at the two women. "In fact, apart from me, Tony is the only person granted direct private access to Lord Cassadine." Lalatina let out an impressed whistle. "That's quite the privilege." "It is," Sonia said with a knowing smile. "And speaking of privileges," she turned to Lalatina. "You'll be stationed here on Void Island from now on. Consider this your new base of operations." Lalatina's eyes sparkled at the prospect. "I won't let you down." Sarah leaned closer, curiosity brimming in her voice. "What kind of work will we be doing here?" Sonia guided them deeper into the compound, where rows of advanced machinery hummed and bright screens displayed streams of data. "Right now, we're focusing on energy harnessing and defensive systems," she explained. "Once Lord Cassadine approves, we'll expand into more cutting-edge projects, weaponry, communications networks, even AI. Lalatina ran a fingertip along a console's edge. "Sounds exciting. I can't wait to get started." Sarah inhaled the faint, metallic scent of the lab. "I never thought I'd find myself in a place like this. It's incredible." Sonia shot her a warm look. "Welcome to Void Island, ladies. Here, our only limit is our imagination." "Working here is so much more flexible than at a celebrity hotel," Damien observed, stretching his arms. Sarah nodded. "True, but whether Mr. Stark will take her on is still up in the air. Let's hold off on any promises until we hear from him." Lalatina's pulse quickened at the prospect, though she knew Stark's standards were legendary. Before she could reply, a familiar voice boomed overhead. "Uncertainty? I don't like that word." In the next instant, Tony Stark swooped down from the lab's upper level, landing between them in a swirl of repulsor-lit air. His armor gleamed, and his grin was all confidence. "Damien, Sarah, what's this about hesitating? If Lalatina wants to join us on Void Island, my door's wide open. I've already cleared it with Damien, so there's no obstacle on my end." He locked eyes with Lalatina. Now, about your role and pay, let's hash out the details once Miss Sonia arrives. You'll find my offer more than fair. Lalatina bowed once, her composure steady. Thank you, Mr. Stark. Before anything's set in stone, I'd like the chance to prove my abilities. I won't disappoint you. I'm afraid I'm not quite qualified for the position, Sonia replied evenly. Before I commit, I'd need to observe your operation for a while, to see if I can genuinely serve you well. I don't make decisions on a whim. Lalatina's eyes widened slightly at Mr. Tony's offer to interview Sonia in her presence. It was an honor, certainly, but she knew better than to leap at the first opportunity. Naturally, she said with a gracious nod. There's no rush. Tony inclined his head in approval of Lalatina's measured response, then turned his attention back to Sonia. Miss Sonia, what brings you here today? He asked, adopting a casually curious tone. I understand you've been in contact with Lalatina, and that you intend to hire her as your personal secretary while she remains on the island, to handle your day-to-day needs. He paused, glancing toward Sarah, who stood quietly off to one side. At present, Sarah is the island's only other resident, and if Lalatina is occupied with your affairs, she'll be left entirely alone. I have a proposal that might solve both our problems. Are you interested in hearing it? Sonia leaned forward, her tone businesslike. Normally, Miss Lalatina commutes from Sarah's house. How far is that from here? Pepper answered promptly. It's only a short drive. Having worked with Tony many times, Sonia got straight to the point. So as long as she can make it to work on time, that's all that matters. Where she chooses to live or go after her shift is entirely her own decision. Tony nodded without hesitation. Once Sonia explained the situation, he had no objections. After all, Pepper hadn't lived at his manor at first. She joined him as a secretary and over time moved in to help manage both his professional and personal affairs. Relief washed over Lalatina's face. Thank you very much, Mr. Tony, she said, her gratitude clear in her voice. Lalatina offered Damien a reassuring smile. This is standard procedure at Blue Star, so you don't need to worry. Damien ran a hand through his hair. Honestly, before I learned about the schedules at celebrity hotels, I thought Blue Star was already demanding enough. I had no idea how busy things could get. She laughed softly. You're still green. Later, I'll walk you through my daily routine and explain exactly what I'll need from you. During certain windows, you'll be on call for up to 12 hours a day. No more, no less. Just focus on your assigned tasks within those hours. Tony, watching their conversation, offered his own reassurance. I can't speak for every position at Blue Star, but not every job here is about selling yourself short. We're simply trading time for money. Pulling in 4 to 5 million credits a year isn't easy. Lalatina nodded. If you can stick it out in a celebrity hotel for 7 or 8 years, you'll be in a position to retire or move on to something more laid back. And if it's pure profit you're after, the top performers those hotels promote can make over 10 times what I earn in a year. Life in every field has its own challenges, even for the wealthy who seem to have it all. What impresses me most, Tony said, leaning back and smiling, is that you don't just have ideals, you actually act on them. Tony's praise was genuine. He'd watched too many young people, especially women, rush into their first relationships out of naivete, only to ride a never-ending carousel of fleeting romances. They'd chase that early thrill until they burned out, then settle for something stable and unremarkable. He'd seen the pattern one time too many. He turned to Damien. By the way, do you have a car? Damien shook his head. Not yet. No problem. My car's at your disposal for your commute. I know you'll be staying with Sarah, and this should make things easier. Damien's face lit up with gratitude. Thank you, and for letting me keep such a light schedule. I really appreciate it. Tony waved a hand. Don't mention it. It's not a luxury model, but it'll do the job. Get us both where we need to go. Damien, about the car. Tony's voice trailed off as he stepped into the workshop, folding his arms. If I'm truly going to work for you, Mr. Tony, I replied, then I can only accept your generosity through my salary. Lalatina's eyes brightened the moment she heard those words. She'd been thrilled by the offer, yet the idea of accepting a gift so freely made her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, glancing between us, torn between gratitude and her own pride. A gentle silence settled over the garage. Sunlight slanted through the high windows, dust motes dancing in the beams as if celebrating our unspoken agreement. The hum of the city outside carried on, but here, in this moment, we were bound by a new understanding, one built on respect, fairness, and the promise of shared success. With that final detail settled, we were ready to move forward. The fourth update was officially in place, and so was our next chapter together. Chapter 234, Is There Any Problem? All right, come with me, Tony said, leading the way down the corridor. I'll show you the lab and run through the daily tasks I'll need you to handle. You won't be working any longer hours than you did at the Celebrity Hotel, but there's still plenty to keep you busy. Tony glanced at Sonia and Lalatina. Sarah and I will head back first, Sonia nodded. Once we leave, Mr. Tony, please ask Jarvis to bring Lalatina to Sarah's residence. With the plan settled, Sonia had no reason to linger. Don't worry, it's all straightforward. Tony gave them a friendly wave. Goodbye for now. See you tonight, Lalatina. Sarah realized it was time to go, so she waved farewell and followed Sonia. As they walked away, Sarah let out a small sigh of relief. That's wonderful. Lalatina will finally be allowed to stay on the island. Sonia smiled. Mr. Tony can be a bit absent-minded, but he always keeps his word. If Lalatina works hard, Sarah added with a hopeful look, I'm sure Mr. Tony will reward her. Sonia leaned in, her voice low with excitement. If you earn Cassidine's approval, you're not just permitted to stay on Void Island, you'll actually grow stronger. His blessings aren't given lightly. Sarah's eyes flickered with envy. I'd love that, she admitted, but what if I can't pass his test? I've never even met Mr. Cassidine. All I've heard are the wild legends people swap in taverns. She forced a smile, but it wavered. The thought of settling here, of working as a record keeper and earning a steady income, was tempting. Still, she lacked confidence. In the past month, she'd watched hopeful newcomers arrive, eager to join the Void God faith, only to leave in disgrace after 2 fruitless months. A year might sound generous, but when every day is spent sweating over tedious duties, time shrinks to nothing. Sonia patted her shoulder. I can't guarantee you'll pass his trial, she said gently, but this much I promise. Mr. Cassidine watches everything that happens on this island, including you. Sarah blinked. Even me. Especially you. Sonia smiled. Lalatina just arrived, and the reason I'm here is because Cassidine personally asked me to keep an eye on her. He's concerned about how newcomers adapt, and he'll notice anyone who stands out, for better or worse. A pair of footsteps echoed behind them, and both women fell silent. The test was coming soon, and there was no turning back. Sonia leaned back in her chair, listening as Sarah fretted across from her. Tony's rumor, you heard it too, right? That he brought some famous actress back from the Celebrity Hotel? Sarah's eyes widened. I did, every whisper in the hallways. But what does it mean for me? Sonia offered a reassuring half-smile. It means Mr. Cassidine knows how to pick his company. He's not the sort to settle for just anyone. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I can't promise you'll succeed, but don't lose heart. Treat this as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Sarah frowned. But what if he's not interested in me at all? What if I fail? Sonia reached out and tapped Sarah gently on the forehead with one slender finger. Look, even if you don't get what you're hoping for, you'll walk away with a hefty consolation. 1.2 million isn't small change, and you'll gain valuable experience for next time. Sarah drew in a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. You're right, I'll give it everything I've got. Exactly, Sonia said, standing. Now, go back to the Temple of Records and focus on your work. Leave the rest to fate. As Sarah hurried off, determined, Sonia slipped out of the office and made her way up the winding road to the mountaintop villa. She had one crucial test ahead, to find out whether Mr. Cassidine's interests lay where she hoped they did. If they didn't, well, she barely dared consider the alternative. But she would know soon enough. Damien's mountaintop villa was quiet when Sonia stepped through the front door. He looked up from the papers spread across the dining room table. Have our arranged accommodations for that guest Tony brought from the Celebrity Hotel? He asked casually. Sonia set her bag down and smoothed her hair. Yes, her name is Lalatina. She'll stay with Sarah once Sarah's shift ends, and she's brought a companion along too. Damien inclined his head. The way he'd referred to Lalatina as beautiful just now made Sonia's heart skip. If he considered her attractive, then his taste was clearly impeccable. "I've been out all day and I'm drenched in sweat," Sonia continued, brushing a hand across her forehead. "I'm going to shower first. After that, I'll get started on dinner." "Go ahead," Damien said, not even glancing up. Sonia paused by the staircase, cloak sliding from her shoulders. He hadn't looked at her once. Was it indifference or simply restraint? She smiled to herself. Once she'd freshened up and slipped into something both innocent and undeniably alluring, she'd be sure to catch his eye. Having made her decision, Sonia slipped back to her room. Damien was lounging on the couch, absorbed in a handheld game, when he paused, mid-button press, a question forming in his mind. With Sonia's current fitness level, wouldn't she overheat walking around the island for very long? "Sonia?" The moment he called her name, she was there. Damien looked up and froze. Sonia stood in the doorway, wrapped in a soft white bathrobe that clung gently to her curves, the fabric parting just enough to reveal the smooth skin of her neck and décolletage. Any man would be taken aback. Her beauty, her vulnerability so close at hand, was undeniably distracting. Still, Damien forced himself to remain calm. The ease with which Sonia showed herself to him spoke volumes. She trusted him completely, and he would not betray that trust. One rash move could shatter their fragile bond and turn him, in her eyes, from protector into beast. Instead, he gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, determined to be the gentleman she believed him to be. Damien tapped the edge of his desk impatiently. "Nothing's wrong. Just hurry up and get cleaned. I'm thirsty and want something to drink." He forced his voice to stay steady, though irritation burned just beneath the surface. Turning away, he refocused on the holographic display hovering before him. "Okay. 10 minutes, he added softly. Sonia met his gaze hopefully, as if she might coax a gentler answer from him. But Damien didn't give her the satisfaction. He offered only a curt nod. Disappointed, she nevertheless replied with practiced deference and slipped out of the room. The instant the door closed, Damien let out a slow breath. If the void's power enveloping his features weren't hiding his true emotions, Sonia would have read the darkness in his thoughts just now. She was too vulnerable, wandering around him unprotected, oblivious to the danger he posed. He'd have to choose the right moment to explain things to her, and he'd certainly need to find some way to ease these mounting urges of his elsewhere before he lost all control and harmed her. Meanwhile, Sonia had already retreated to the bathroom. She sank into the warm bathwater, peering down at her slim feet and the pale curve of her ankles reflected on the surface. As the steam curled around her, Damien forced his focus back to the glowing runes dancing on the screen before him, determined to keep his darker impulses at bay. "I'd be happy to help. With the full text of the chapter, I can deliver a smooth, polished English rewrite. Could you please paste the entire chapter here?" Chapter 235, Unexpected Visitor. Sonia stepped out of the bathroom, her damp blonde hair brushing against a crisp white blouse tucked neatly into a matching skirt. Even in simple attire, her impeccable posture and hourglass figure lent her an effortless grace. She carried a tray with 2 glasses of water and set one before Damien. "Your drink, Mr. Cassadine," she said, her voice soft yet confident. As Sonia leaned forward to place the glass on Damien's table, he couldn't help but notice the elegant sweep of her neckline, the delicate curve of her collarbone, and the perfect line of her jaw beneath those golden locks. His gaze drifted downward to the slender column of her waist and continued to the sandals she wore, where her toes peeked out, small and perfectly formed. The faint scent of her shower gel, a clean, floral note, lingered in the air. Caught off guard by the sudden intimacy of the moment, Damien realized he had nowhere to rest his eyes without feeling guilty. At home, Sonia's style was relaxed and unguarded. Outside, she transformed into the poised, polished woman everyone admired. Yet despite the change in wardrobe, her beauty was constant. In this quiet living room, where she'd let down her guard completely, an unexpected vulnerability shone through, and it stirred something in him. Damien cleared his throat. "Thank you," he managed, setting aside his restless thoughts. But as Sonia retreated to the sofa, he found himself wondering just how well he really knew the woman before him, and what other surprises this evening might hold. Damien set his controller aside, thinking ahead to keep the peace at Hilltop Villa and avoid any embarrassing mix-ups. "Sonia," he called. She poked her head around the doorway, clearly surprised when he addressed her so formally. "Yes, Mr. Cassadine?" He gave her a gentle smile. "I get that you're comfortable here and like to dress down. But remember, we don't live alone. Guests might arrive at any time." Sonia glanced at her loose tank top and sweatpants, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" "If someone like Mr. Tony drops by unexpectedly, you'll want to be more presentable, or at least give him a heads-up before he walks in." Damien's tone was mild but firm. "You need to pay attention to how you dress when company could arrive." Her cheeks tinged pink as realization dawned. "Of course, if Mr. Tony or anyone else comes by, I'll change or excuse myself first." She met Damien's eyes, nodding, and at last the point was fully grasped. "The mountaintop villa has stood here for years, and yet we almost never have visitors. Our only occasional guest is Mr. Tony, and even he drops by so infrequently that his visits consist of little more than a polite hello. That's why I've grown used to dressing down while I'm here. I know clothing has always made you uncomfortable, Sonia, and though I've wondered what you thought of my appearance, I've never pressed the issue. If you'd ever asked me to change, I would have, without hesitation. But right now, there really are no guests. No one but you, so I feel perfectly at ease in my everyday attire. If someone important were coming, of course I'd slip into something more formal. Until then, I hope you'll allow me to relax." Sonia's eyes softened, and a warm smile curved her lips. She stepped closer, her voice lowered to a playful lilt. "Is that so?" she teased, reaching out to straighten the collar of his shirt. "Well then, relax you shall." Damien listened to Sonia's explanation and found himself at a loss for a counter-argument. She was right. With no other guests at home, having her handle the greeting wouldn't inconvenience anyone. And if he insisted on swapping her out, he'd risk revealing his real motives. And once she sensed that, it could undermine her enthusiasm or, worse, complicate their working relationship. Better, he decided, to pretend nothing was amiss. If he needed to blow off steam later, he could always step out. "All right," he said, forcing a calm tone. Sonia caught a flash of surprise on Mr. Cassadine's face but concealed her satisfaction. "Thank you, Mr. Cassadine." Her grin lit up the room. The little test had achieved exactly what she'd hoped. She wasn't invisible to him, and his reaction confirmed his interest was perfectly normal. Convinced of her own appeal and reassured about his feelings, she hopped onto the sofa, opened her notebook, and resumed work with renewed vigor. "I'm going on a trip." The moment Sonia's face lit up, Damien knew what he had to do. He rose swiftly, ready to announce his decision, only to pause when he caught movement down at the docks. "An unexpected guest," he murmured, eyes fixed on a sleek speedboat cutting through the lagoon. Below, a tall man with jet-black hair stepped onto Void Island's pier, his presence drawing every eye. Damien glanced back at Sonia. "I'll be right back. Got to change." Sonia didn't hesitate. She bolted for her room. Technically, she didn't need a new outfit. Damien wouldn't have let Rocky anywhere near the villa, but switching clothes helped her calm the flutter in her chest. Damien offered no objection. Moments later at the island's harbor cafe, the prophet, tucked into his own breakfast, caught sight of the newcomer and stiffened. "He's here," he whispered, voice low. "Thor's brother has arrived." Kyle, halfway through a mouthful of pastry, paused and frowned. "You mean Loki? That worthless trickster?" Outside, the black-haired stranger adjusted his cloak and strode toward the villa, unaware that his arrival had already set every mind on edge on Void Island. Chapter 28, 10,000th Update. How did the Asgardians discover this place? Renoli's voice echoed off the cavern walls as he inspected the crystalline glyphs hovering before him. The seer stood beside him, her iridescent robes whispering against the obsidian floor. "He followed the trail we set. He parsed every scrap of intelligence we leaked," she answered softly. "And now he's come, eager to pledge himself to the void." At her words, the precog, eyes already glazed, slipped into a trance. In the space of a breath, he scoured countless possible futures, his mind alighting on every conceivable exchange with Loki. When he finally spoke, his tone was grave. "It's not Master Cassadine's approval we should fear," the precog murmured. It's whether God King Odin will tolerate that one of his own blood bows before another deity. Renali's brow furrowed. He tapped a rune-etched pillar, considering the prophecy. If Odin were dead, we could dismiss his judgment, he admitted. But we all know he yet walks the 9 realms in triumph. Lacey stepped forward, determination alight in her eyes. Then we must steel ourselves, she declared. God King Odin's wrath is not something to be taken lightly. Above them, a blood-red moon crept into view beyond the fractured arches of the Void Citadel, casting an ominous glow over the gathered conspirators. End of update number 10,000. Chapter 236, Rocky lands on the island. No one here truly understands the depth of Kassadin's power, the so-called Great God of the Void. What they know is simple. With Kassadin watching over them, there's nothing to fear. Beyond that, the Void Divine cult is still in its infancy, barely a whisper across the stars compared to the age-old legend of God King Odin. For countless races, Odin is the living embodiment of divinity, and Asgard's might is universally acknowledged. Few dare threaten the 9 realms. Fortunately, the Void cult's ambitions don't extend that far. Its influence remains confined to Xandar and the neighboring star systems. We're a long way from Asgard, so there's no real history of hostility between our faith and theirs. When we lent our support to Tony Stark in the past, it was simply a favor to Odin's people. No grudges were born from that alliance. But every rule has its exception. If Loki ever pledged himself to the Void, he'd instantly become our shared enemy, and the consequences could be dire. Imagine Thor on Asgard's throne, Odin fallen, and suddenly we'd have Asgard's full wrath aimed squarely at us. Such a risk would far outweigh any short-term gain. Since the Void cult had just aided Thor, Lacey thought there might be some leeway, yet with Odin still alive, they'd never dare recruit Asgardians under his watch. She was convinced, therefore, that Lord Kassadin would refuse Loki's entry into the Void. Still, she added, we're guests. We might as well go see for ourselves. Renoli nodded in agreement. He understood Lacey's caution, but the heart of the Void God cult lay on Void Island, and Loki's unexpected arrival there demanded first-hand confirmation. Kyle looked puzzled. Shouldn't we let Miss Sonia know first? He stood, restless, clearly itching to investigate. Given her gifts, Sonia has to sense Loki's presence already. The prophet considered this for a moment. No need for a formal summons, he said at last. Let's cross over and observe Sonia's reaction in person. If she's intrigued, she'll step forward to greet Loki. If she remains in hiding, that silence will count as a refusal. With that, the 4 of them prepared to journey to Void Island, uncertain what welcome, if any, awaited them among the Void God cult's shadows. That makes sense. Kyle's eyes widened in sudden clarity, and he realized he'd asked a pointless question. He nodded sheepishly as the others gathered outside the mountaintop villa. From his vantage point on the veranda, Damien watched Renoli and her guards advance, ready to negotiate before they set foot inside. He had no intention of recruiting Loki into the Void cult. Beyond Loki's unpredictable nature, once someone falls under the Void's influence, desire and chaos follow in its wake. There was a far more pressing concern. Odin, the All-Father and Loki's father, still lived, though his end drew near. If Odin learned that Loki had pledged himself to the Void, he would see it as a direct affront and make war on the cult. Damien wasn't about to court that kind of disaster, only to be left cleaning up the ruins later. As for Thor, once Odin passed, Damien might have the chance to win him over, but he wouldn't force the issue. Thor was no impulsive hothead like Tony Stark, nor a steadfast ally like Steve Rogers. He respected Thor's freedom to choose his own path. For now, the only order of business was to see how these delicate negotiations would unfold. Damien watched the latest reports with deep concern. Even if Tony and Steve pressed him to allow his wife and the ex-girlfriend he still cared about to join the Void, they would add only a handful of people at best. Tony's dream of propelling Blue Star into the interstellar era was admirable, but it was his dream, not an obligation for everyone to bear. Even if that plan failed, the world would carry on. Thor was another matter. Since Odin's death, Thor had become the de facto protector of all Asgardians. If he were to join the Void, he wouldn't come alone. He'd surely urge, or even demand, that Asgard as a who follow him into the cult. The sheer weight of that faction's power and influence could tip the delicate balance Damien was struggling to maintain. He could not, at this stage, risk fracturing the Void cult by adding an entire Asgardian bloc. Late afternoon was slipping into evening as Loki stood by the harbor, gazing at the tranquil island bathed in sunset gold. His mind drifted back to Asgard, where his father had been furious at his last misdeed. Thanks to Thor's intercession, though, his punishment had been more lenient than expected, a mere 18 days of imprisonment compared to the harsh sentence Loki had originally feared. Now, watching the horizon, Loki wondered how much longer he could remain patient and what storm might be brewing next. After emerging from confinement, Loki turned his attention to the Renoli. His investigation quickly uncovered traces of the Void God cult among them. A number of Renoli were quietly worshipping an entity called Kassadin, the so-called God of the Void. Although the cult was still in its infancy, Loki already knew of Kassadin's ruthless reputation. Perhaps because the Void faith was so new, its adherents kept a lower profile than the likes of Thanos or God King Odin. Even so, by galactic standards, Kassadin was both prominent and powerful. Piecing together scattered rumors and reports, Loki grew 90% certain that this Kassadin was really Damien of Blue Star. Intrigued and eager for whatever blessing a Void God might bestow, he set course immediately for the island where the cult was said to gather. But before he could row ashore, a familiar figure appeared on the pier. "Loki," Renault called out, stepping into view. "What brings you here?" "Damien, you've arrived just in time. I've got something I'd like to discuss with you." Loki had been hesitating over whom to approach, but the moment Damien appeared, his doubts melted away and a genuine smile broke across his face. "If you're here just to socialize, you're more than welcome," he said. "But if you've come seeking the blessing of Lord Kassadin, God of the Void, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed." Damien had heard Loki's true story from Tony. Although Loki had lent his power during the war on Blue Star, he'd also played a part in its darker deeds, until circumstances forced him to renounce the Void and side with the light. Still, Blue Star wasn't Damien's homeland, so he felt little urge to pass moral judgment. "I do want to join the embrace of the Void," he replied evenly, "but why declare me unworthy before I've even tried?" Loki's eyes glittered with false innocence. "Because your father is the God King Odin." Before Damien could answer, a thunderous boom rent the air. Kyle plummeted from the sky, landing feet first in a swirl of dust. He straightened his cloak and glared at Loki. "What's this about a grudge against God King Odin?" Loki's grin only widened. "Exactly that. I've never liked that old man," Damien muttered. Loki listened intently to his reasons. Nodding, he replied, "Understood." With that, he dispatched the second update. Chapter 237, coming soon. "Don't act so surprised," Lacey said, folding her arms. "I don't know exactly what's been going on at home, but to everyone else, ourselves included, your father is still the All-Father Odin." She looked Loki squarely in the eye. "Across the 9 realms, it's common knowledge that Thor and Loki are Odin's sons. No matter how much you may have clashed with your family in Asgard, or how you feel about your parents now, you've always had the support of the God King. Surely you've heard that before?" Loki's jaw tightened, and he took a step forward, frustration evident on his face. "I'm adopted. Nothing like Thor," he shot back, his voice trembling. For a moment, Renault and the others exchanged stunned glances, unable to believe what they were hearing as they stared at the Prince of Asgard. Damien's eyes flicked away. "It's complicated," he said softly. "I can't explain it right now." Loki folded his arms, leaning back against the cold stone wall. "Before you arrived, I did some digging," he replied. "When Kassadin, the so-called God of the Void, first founded his faith, he opened the path to glorious evolution for every willing soul. There's no clause in his doctrine that bars Asgardians from joining. Correct?" A hush fell over the small audience of 4. Loki held their gazes before stepping forward to stand directly in front of Damien. "Kassadin never forbade us," he continued. "But you're no ordinary follower. You're Damien, Prince of Asgard, and one of the heirs apparent to the throne. Rather than preparing for your future role, you've rushed here, eager to pledge yourself to the Void cult. Tell me," his voice darkened, "have you thought at all about how your father will react?" Renali, standing just behind Loki, frowned and spoke up in a low, serious tone. Remember that the Void cult is still in its infancy. Its power is untested, nothing like the might of Asgard. You risk more than just your reputation by throwing in with them. Damien's jaw tightened. He understood the implication. By aligning himself with Cassidon's followers, he wasn't merely practicing a new faith. He was challenging the expectations of a kingdom and a king. And now, everyone in the chamber seemed to be waiting for his answer. Renaud leaned back, folding his fingers together as he regarded Loki across the table. If everything proceeds smoothly, this probationary period won't last long. But if it draws us into a large-scale conflict, the Void will either swallow our opponent's rapid gains or force us to pour vast resources into a protracted war, stalling our own development in the process. Yes, joining the Void prolongs your life, but no one wants to be stuck in limbo forever. Even if Miss Sonia intercedes, I'll have to spell out the risks for her. Allowing you to enter could do more harm than good. Loki's confident smirk wavered. He straightened his shoulders and invoked every ounce of his royal bearing. Very well, he said coolly. Then I'll simply visit Void Island as a bystander, enjoy myself while I'm there. Renaud sighed. It was true that the bar for admission was set high, and he suspected Loki wouldn't give up easily. After a pause, he offered, "You're welcome to come, on a guest pass, but heed my warning, behave yourself on the island, or you'll end up on the wrong end of a very painful lesson. Don't say I didn't warn you." Renaud knew Loki's pride wouldn't allow him to drop the subject so soon. All he could do now was leave the final decision in Lord Cassidon's hands. "Not everyone in the Void cult has innate superpowers like you," Loki said with a shrug. Damien grinned. "Yeah, but an ordinary strongman still couldn't lay a finger on me." Loki barely registered the comment until several figures rocketed past overhead. "Are they flying?" he whispered, eyes narrowing. He glanced at Kyle and Renoli for confirmation. Renoli spoke up first. "Flight is one of the basic abilities among Void cultists. Most of our members aren't born with superhuman gifts, but after receiving Lord Cassidon's blessing, they are far stronger than ordinary people." Kyle nodded. "So when you're on this island, watch your behavior. If you stir up trouble and get pummeled, the best I can promise is to keep you from bleeding out." Kyle offered a thin smile. "After all, you're Thor's brother. As long as you're not looking to join the Void God cult and stir up trouble for them, we've got no objections." His companion nodded. "You're welcome to visit the Void God temple too. Come with us. We'll show you around the island." Loki tensed, clearly bristling at their insistence. "I appreciate the offer," he said coolly, "but I'm perfectly capable of getting around on my own." Kyle glanced at him, then shrugged. "Really, it's no bother." Loki opened his mouth to refuse again, but before the words escaped, Lacey casually tapped her comm device. In an instant, a hollow projector sprung to life above her palm. Loki's eyes widened as he read the name floating in midair, Tony Stark. His heart skipped. The legend known as the Blue Star's ruthless operative, a man who carried out every mission without question, had made a lasting impression on him the last time they crossed paths. "Wait, Lacey, what are you doing?" Loki demanded, leaping forward to silence the feed. Lacey offered him a calm, self-assured smile. "Tony's already on the island, and he's worked with you before. I thought it'd be simpler to have him guide you." Loki shot her a sharp look. "There's no need." But Lacey merely shook her head, deactivating the projector. "Don't worry, we've made all the arrangements." And with that, she slipped the device back into her pocket, leaving Loki to swallow his objections as the others pressed forward. Damien shifted from foot to foot. "I'm so sorry to interrupt you." Lacey gave him a teasing grin. "If Tony Stark were here, you wouldn't be so polite." Loki laughed, brushing back a strand of dark hair. "No need for apologies. We Asgardians are free to enjoy good company, and so is Tony Stark." Without missing a beat, Lacey tapped her wrist console. Since we're barely a few kilometers from the lab instead of light years apart, the secure link sprang to life in under 2 seconds. "Lacey? What's up?" Tony's voice crackled through. "It's not about dinner," she said, still smiling as she glanced at her holo display. "We have a guest from Asgard here on the island. I thought you'd want to see." Tony paused the wormhole jump data he was studying. "A guest from Asgard? They don't usually wander outside the 9 realms, especially when they're not on official business." Is it Thor? Lacey chuckled. Half right. It's not Thor. It's his brother, Loki. Damien's heart skipped a beat. Loki? Here on the island? He couldn't wait to see how Stark would react. Where are you now? Loki asked into the comm. At the docks, Tony replied, springing to his feet. I'll be there soon, Lacey added. Tony ended the transmission, and in an instant a figure clad in gleaming steel armor rocketed skyward, heading straight for the harbor. Lacey watched the feed go dark, then turned to Loki with a teasing smile. I just remembered something back in Asgard I need to take care of. I'll be off then. Loki's mind raced for a plan of retreat, or at least a way to keep their guest from leaving so abruptly. Don't rush off, he said. You've traveled all this way to meet us. A little hospitality would hardly go amiss in the Void God faith. Before he could say more, Lacey reached out and caught his arm. Loki tugged, surprised to find her deceptively slender limbs impossibly strong, like a humanoid female Tyrannosaurus. He frowned, caught off guard by her grip. A soft chime from the console interrupted them both. Third update received, Loki announced. Chapter 238, Discovering the True Identity. Loki thrashed and struggled against the invisible hold that seized his arm, but the grip wouldn't budge. He tried to shift into his phantom form, to slip away like smoke, but nothing happened. There was no denying it. He was trapped. With a scowl of frustration, he froze in place. Tony Stark's laboratory wasn't far from the old seaport, a swift flight of barely 2 minutes. Then, with a thunderous boom, a figure in brilliant steel armor hurtled from the sky, crashing to the ground about 10 meters from Loki. Dust and debris kicked up around him as he righted himself, repulsors glowing faintly in the dim light. Loki, Tony called, dusting off his gauntlet. I never thought we'd cross paths again so soon. Loki forced a polite bow. I merely came to pay a call. Tony's lips twitched into a sardonic smile. On Xandar, not on Earth's blue star, mind you. I've no quarrel with Earth, so I assume you're not here for a friendly chat. Loki's hair bristled at the implication. Knowing you, Stark, you'd suspect foul play, even if I brought you tea. Stepping forward, Tony's eyes narrowed. And your brother Thor, he's supposed to keep you locked tight in Asgard. Yet here you are, strolling unannounced across the cosmos. Care to explain how you slipped past his guards? Thor might tolerate a bit of mischief from his brother. Tony Stark certainly would not. He cracked his knuckles, the power in his suit humming to life. I'm listening, Loki. What's your game? Loki met the challenge, his green cloak swirling around him. The moment of deception was over. Now came the reckoning. I'm here at my brother's request, to visit the Void Cult and thank Renoli and the others, Loki said as he stepped forward. Despite Renault and his companions' formidable reputations, Loki didn't feel threatened. Renault was a cosmic-born being who already knew Loki's true identity as the Asgardian prince. As long as Loki didn't make the first move, Kyle and the rest wouldn't act without permission. Tony was another matter entirely. He openly disliked Loki, and with his close ties to Thor, Tony could very well slap him down and call Asgard to haul him back at any moment. Loki had managed to slip away only by the skin of his teeth. All it would take was one summons from Tony to send him packing. It should be Thor here to show our gratitude, not you, Tony sneered. I'll ask Thor myself, Loki replied calmly. The name Thor was all Tony needed. He didn't ask what was happening with Lacey or Blue Star. He knew Renal and the others had come to the Star's aid. If Thor was free, it made perfect sense for him to come and offer thanks in person. With that, Tony tapped his cosmic communicator and reached out to his brother, saying nothing more. Loki, ever cunning and meticulous, had quietly slipped onto Void Island to probe the cult of the Void. Though Damien was posted there, Loki knew he posed no immediate threat to him. His presence unsettled the other cultists instead. Sensing the need for more intelligence, Tony Stark had been trying to follow Loki's trail. But when Loki noticed Tony was distracted, he decided to contact Thor directly. With a snap of his fingers, he cloaked his face and opened the cosmic communicator, fully expecting Thor to detect his clandestine move. Loki had done his homework on the Void Cult. Their tendrils reached deep into the world of bounty hunters. Crucially, Tony Stark's name did not appear on any of their wanted lists, so Loki had approached the island with relative confidence. Had he known that Stark himself was already on Void Island, He would have picked a far better moment to make his move. The communicator beeped insistently for over a minute before Tony's voice finally crackled through the link. "Thor? What's going on over there?" Thor's hearty laughter boomed through the channel. "How goes it with our brother Loki?" Tony's tone turned steely. "Let me guess. You won't be going easy on him this time, right?" Tony tapped the comm unit. "Father wanted to keep him locked up for the full term." Thor frowned. "And yet you released him after only 2 weeks." "I'd given my word," Tony replied. Thor folded his arms. "Then why is he sulking behind locked doors again? What happened?" Tony smirked. "Well, if your brother is holed up in his room, who do you think I'm talking to right now?" Thor's brow shot up. "Switch to the holographic feed, and you'll see for yourself." With a quick gesture, Tony converted the call to a hologram. Thor nodded, and a moment later, the darkened expanse of Asgard's ancient audience chamber sprang into view, marble columns soaring overhead, runes glowing on the walls. Leaning casually against one of the pillars stood Loki, his dark hair falling over his shoulders, expression cool and unbothered. Thor's eyes widened. "Loki, have you already forgotten your promise to me?" From the projection, Loki straightened and offered a wry bow. "Brother, there's no need to be so angry." "You know I was locked up and in a rotten mood," Loki began, leaning back. "So I figured I'd come out and unwind." "There wasn't any trouble," Thor growled. Loki shot Thor an anxious look. "Tony, is that right? My brother really didn't cause any problems?" Thor crossed his arms and glanced at Tony. "Not yet. He hasn't done anything wrong." Tony's eyes gleamed. "But do you know where he is right now?" Thor frowned. Blue Star?" Saul, watching the holo projector, shook her head in confusion. "If he'd gone to Blue Star, we'd have contacted you by now." Tony's smirk grew wider. "Actually, he's on Void Island in the Xandar system, the Void God Cult's main base." "The Void God Cult headquarters?" Saul exclaimed. Thor's expression went from disbelief to alarm. "Loki, why would Damien head straight for the cult's stronghold? Why hasn't he returned?" At the mention of Kassadin, the Void God, whose name still sent shivers through the galaxy, Thor's mind raced. His father had never outright banned contact with the cult, but everyone knew Kassadin's reputation. And now Damien was on their doorstep. Damien was, without question, an extraordinary powerhouse. Even the most devastating planetary catastrophes would normally take ages to untangle, yet under Kassadin's hand, the god of the void, they never lasted a full day. Damien understood exactly why Tony wielded such overwhelming strength. Tony had been blessed by Damien Ambalaka himself. Tony, ever proud, claimed he had roamed the cosmos for eons and that the universe's vastness scarcely fazed him. But now that he stood on Void Island, the secret stronghold of the Cult of the Void, there could be no doubt where his true allegiance lay. The Cult of the Void was a rising force in the galaxy. Its founder, Kassadin, promised all who followed him a chance at a magnificent evolution. He possessed near-limitless power and could confer a fraction of that blessing on others. If Kassadin was granting these blessings, then Damien Ambalaka's true identity had to be Kassadin, the god of the void himself. Thor hadn't forgotten his father's stern injunction: never provoke Damien Ambalaka. So long as they refrained from making the first move, Damien would honor his debt to Thor's family, and both sides could maintain the uneasy peace. Now that Loki had boldly crossed into Kassadin's realm, the stage was set for a titanic clash between the universe's two greatest powerhouses. With that, the fourth update was dispatched. Chapter 239, Save Me. "Thor," Tony said, stepping forward as the Asgardian raised his hammer. "You don't need to be so worked up. Loki hasn't done anything reckless yet. Just escort him back and take care of whatever comes up." Thor paused, Mjolnir's head inches from the floor. His storm-gray gaze flicked toward Tony, unease plain on his face. "And keep this quiet," Tony added, voice firm but low. "We can't have rumors flying. Even if Loki's perfectly all right, a stray whisper could trigger a scandal." Thor's grip tightened. He hesitated, and Tony recognized the look. Thor had just realized something about Damien's secret identity in this universe. "Look," Tony said, softening his tone. "Damien chose life on Blue Star because he wanted freedom. He's built himself a quieter existence, far from gods and villains. Don't blow his cover." The Thunder God released his hammer and set it aside. He understood full well how fragile trust could be. Expose Damien, or drag him into the spotlight, and you'll lose him, Tony continued. He'll shut down completely. No more cooperation, no more help. Thor's shoulders relaxed. He drew in a slow breath, as though releasing a storm cloud. Very well, he rumbled. I will bring Loki back discreetly, and I will honor your wish regarding Damien. Tony gave a small, satisfied nod. Good. When Damien's in a good mood, he's nothing but reasonable. Trust me, you don't want to see him when he isn't. Thor allowed himself a half smile. Then he picked up Mjolnir and strode from the lab, his decision made. Tony turned back to the consoles, already strategizing their next move. Damien leaned against the jet's boarding ramp, arms crossed, and shot Tony a wry grin. Looks like I'm in trouble on your account again, Stark. Tony gave him a playful shrug. Next time we'll celebrate with a drink. My treat. Damien forced a small smile. Before he could reply, Thor strode up. The Aesir prince inclined his head politely, but his eyes gleamed with concern. Thank you, Damien, he said. A drink sounds like a fine idea, once this is over. Now, be swift and stay safe. Thor turned to Loki, his expression hardening. Loki, your mischief is one thing, usually minor enough to clean up. But if you provoke Damien again, I may not be there in time to fix it. If Father learns you risked him, Odin will wake from his slumber in anger. Loki rolled his eyes. Relax, brother. I came here merely as a visitor. I have no wish to cause more chaos. You're all far too tense. Thor's glare grew colder. The universe is vast, he said, voice low, and yet you chose the Void God Sect's headquarters of all places to poke around. Explain that. Loki smirked. Curiosity. Thor took a step closer, his thunderous presence suddenly threatening. Return to Asgard now, before Father awakens. He's deep in Odin's sleep. I won't risk his wrath on your behalf. Damien watched them, pulse quickening. The uneasy truce between the brothers and the danger he'd walked into suddenly felt very real. He knew better than to ignore Thor's warning. Whatever lay ahead at the Void God Sect, he couldn't afford to stumble into a family feud of gods. Not if he wanted to walk away in one piece. Damien's quiet assurance, as long as you don't tell him, he won't know, rekindled Loki's confidence, and the trickster straightened his shoulders. But before he could press the advantage, steady footsteps echoed through the hall. Renoli, Kyle, Lacey, and the Predictor all slipped aside, clearing a path for the newcomer. Thor and Loki exchanged puzzled glances as the figure drew near. A striking woman in a flowing black gown, flanked by hooded members of the Void Cult. Tony's eyes brightened. Miss Sonia is here, he murmured to the two gods. This must be what Damien warned us about. At Tony's whisper, Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened, and Loki's expression flickered with unease. The woman stopped about 10 meters away, paused for a breath, and then spoke. Her voice was soft, yet carried the weight of absolute authority. By the will of the Void's chosen, Lord Kassadin, she intoned, you, Loki of Asgard, are permitted to remain on Void Island for a time. She let the words hang for a moment, her gaze sweeping the chamber like a shadow. Then she added coolly, yet know this, your purpose here shall not reach fulfillment. When your granted time expires, you will depart and not return. Sonia's eyes held Loki's for an instant, daring him to protest. He inclined his head in acknowledgement, while Thor remained silent, watchful. Without another word, Sonia turned and allowed her entourage to guide her back down the corridor. As the last cultist vanished, a tense hush settled over the hall. Loki, for the first time in days, seemed uncertain, and Damien, watching from the shadows, allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Why? Damien's voice rang out, frustration edging his words. Didn't the Void Divine Religion promise a chance for everyone? I want to grow stronger too. Why can they receive blessings, but I can't? He had been told he could stay on the island for a while, yet he would never be granted the Void's favor. Damien pressed a hand to his chest, eyes wide with disbelief. There has to be a reason. There isn't, Sonia replied crisply, withholding any further sympathy. This is simply the will of Lord Kassadin, the god of the Void. She knew better than to elaborate. From the moment she discovered Damien's true heritage, she understood why Asgardians were barred from full membership. Perhaps, once the Void cult's influence expanded and its hierarchy solidified, noble races like the Asgardians might be welcomed. But that day had not yet come. Mr. Kassadin himself had made it clear. At present, the cult boasted over 500 followers drawn from every corner of existence. Only the fervent sect on Mowgli's moon could claim a larger contingent. Sonia didn't know when Kassadin had granted them his blessing, but their numbers spoke for themselves. Those dozen or so fanatics on Mowgli had nothing to fear. Their faith had already secured their place. If the Void Cult ever succeeds in extending its dominion, the Mowgli stars will be the spark that sets the entire galaxy ablaze. A hush fell over the chamber as Sonia's words echoed off the stone walls. Then she bowed her head in deference. "We thank you, Kassadin, God of the Void, for your mercy." Thor's shoulders slumped with relief. He turned to his brother, a rueful smile on his lips. "You've escaped with your life this time. Truly, his clemency is astounding." Loki opened his mouth to respond, but immediately froze. Across the hall, Renoli and her companions formed a silent ring around him. Though they hadn't attacked him outright before, their sudden proximity and steely gazes felt like a death trap closing in. A cold bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Stepping forward, Sonia's voice took on a frosty edge. "Guests from Asgard," she intoned. "If you wish to depart this place unscathed, choose your words and your manners very carefully. Any slight against the God of the Void, and I make no promise you'll leave alive." Loki swallowed. Despite Kassadin's often disheveled and languid appearance, Sonia had always treated him with reverence. Under her glare now, Loki realized just how dangerously real that respect could be. Chapter 5, Help him, Tony. Thor's voice trembled as he reached for Tony's arm, but the mercenary just shrugged and leaned casually against the carved stone wall. "Save your breath," Tony replied, eyes cool. "If he makes it out of this alive, I'll buy you that drink next time we meet." Thor swallowed hard. He'd spoken without thinking, and now his brother's fate lay in the balance. "He doesn't know what he's up against," Thor insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. Tony gave him a sidelong glance, then shook his head. "I can't do anything for him right now. If he lives or dies, that's on him." Beside them, Saul watched with quiet intensity as Sonia's expression remained unreadable. Thor glanced from one to the other, his hope flickering. Finally, Tony lowered his voice. "You saw it for yourself when we first came to Void Island. The cult practically worships Damien. Sure, Damien and I are close. I could call him or even Lord Kassadin for help if we were alone. But here, in front of Renoli and the rest of these zealots, I have to give Damien the respect they demand. They're warm to their own, but make no mistake, they're merciless to anyone they consider an enemy." Thor's shoulders slumped. He watched Tony turn away. Resignation etched on his face. Beyond the altar's flickering torchlight, the fate of his brother, damn it, Damien, hung in shadow. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 240. He is not a guest. Thor glanced at Loki, then winked. The mighty Kassadin, Lord of the Void, is not only powerful, he's benevolent and magnanimous as well. Loki felt the weight behind Thor's wink, a veiled threat. He kept his hand poised near his dagger, every muscle ready to strike. Yet he knew that on Void Island, magic and trickery were useless, and across from him stood Sonia, flanked by Renoli and Kyle, two warriors who'd butchered Chitauri like cattle. His only chance to walk away unharmed was to speak. "I mean no offense," Loki said, forcing a bow. "I come only to request an audience with Lord Kassadin." Sonia's eyes narrowed, sharp as obsidian blades. "This isn't Asgard, nor any of its 9 realms. This is Void Island. Anyone who approaches with genuine respect is welcome. Anyone who disrespects Lord Kassadin won't find a place to hide." Loki swallowed. There was no escape except through words now. He straightened up and offered his most sincere nod. "Understood. I am at your mercy." Behind Loki, Thor cracked a grin, but Sonia's warning hung in the air like a razor's edge. Here on the island of nothingness, only one man held all the cards, and no one would claim the right to disrespect him. Sonia's voice rang clear through the great hall. "Tony, he comes from one of the 9 realms, just like our own blue star. I want you to receive him, explain our customs and regulations, and then see him safely on his way home." Tony opened his mouth to object. He and Loki certainly weren't on friendly terms, but catching Thor's expectant stare, he shut up almost immediately. Thor cared deeply for his mischievous brother, and Tony knew better than to refuse. With a quick, respectful bow that nearly turned into a genuflection, he said, "Understood. I'll escort him back." Turning to Loki, he offered an exaggerated apology. "I'm sorry for any trouble my friend's brother has caused." He cleared his throat. In a few days, I'll host a formal banquet in your honor. I hope you'll consider this a sincere invitation." Before Loki could mutter a protest, Tony grasped the back of his cloak and rocketed upward, carrying him off in a blur. The assembled members of the Void cult watched in surprised silence as the two figures vanished. Sonia turned to the lingering onlookers. "This was only a minor incident. There's no need to criticize Mr. Tony. You're free to go." One by one, the crowd dispersed, whispering among themselves about Loki's unexpected sojourn and what it might mean for the fragile peace between realms. "We understand. This has nothing to do with Tony." "Thank you, Miss Sonia," Renaud added with a slight bow. "On Tony's behalf, I apologize." He knew that if no one stepped forward, the Void cult might blame Tony for Loki's indiscretion. As Tony's friend, Renaud was well aware that none of this was Tony's fault. Loki, ignorant of his own status, had simply wandered in out of curiosity. "Again, I'm sorry, Miss Sonia." The other cult members, seeing Renaud's earnest contrition, exchanged quick glances. Whatever doubts they harbored, they, too, fell silent in Sonia's presence, offering their greetings and apologies. Sonia inclined her head once in acknowledgement and then turned on her heel, departing without another word. "Don't underestimate this place," Tony snarled. "This is Void Island, the very heart of the Void God sect, where Kassadin, the Void God himself, holds absolute power. Any fool who dares show him disrespect will learn exactly why his authority goes unchallenged. And you, an Asgardian, what makes you think you can waltz in here?" With that, Tony shot Loki across the sky and straight into his underground lab. Loki hit the muddy floor hard, splattering mud all over himself. He lay there blinking in surprise as Tony stomped up. Loki coughed and wiped mud from his eyes. "Tony, thank you for saving me." Thor, standing a few paces away, winced at Tony's harsh tone. He hurried over to help Loki to his feet. "Loki, really, there's no need to. But if anyone deserves your gratitude," Thor continued, casting a meaningful glance at Sonia, "it's Miss Sonia. She never objected when I, just a fellow from Blue Star, snatched you away. Without her nod, I never would have dared interfere. Otherwise, even 100 lifetimes wouldn't be enough to keep you alive here." Tony waved Thor off and brushed mud from his lab coat. "Cut the theatrics," he said gruffly. "Let's just say I got lucky. Now help him clean up, and then we decide our next move." "Thank you. If an opportunity ever comes up, I'll make sure to repay you." Thor rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "But who exactly is Miss Sonia?" He just realized that Loki's permission to leave had come at Sonia's behest. Nodding to confirm, he turned back to Damien. "We're all gods here. Speak plainly." Damien settled against the rocky ledge and met Thor's gaze. "On Void Island, the Void faith worships the god of the Void under Lord Kassadin. Sonia isn't just a follower. She's the god of the Void's personal envoy." Thor exchanged a look with Loki. "The Void god's envoy?" Loki pushed himself to his feet, brushing dirt from his tunic. "If she's that important, why didn't I find her name in any of my reports?" Damien exhaled slowly. "Based on what I gathered online, the Void cult has about 400 members. They've even organized themselves into a formal syndicate among the bounty hunting circles." Loki folded his arms. "That matches my findings exactly. There's more, but it all points back to Sonia's discreet influence." The three gods fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts as the gravity of Sonia's role and the reach of the Void cult settled between them. Damien stepped into the chamber, his eyes sweeping over its smooth obsidian walls. Faint, pulsating runes glowed along the floor, marking the path to the inner sanctum of the Void divine religion. Before him, Loki, the temple's self-styled guide, looked uneasy. Tony stood at Loki's side, arms folded. "So," he said, voice sharp, "you really plan to waltz in there without a single scrap of knowledge about the Void cult?" Loki's shoulders twitched, but he kept silent. Tony took us closer. "Tell me plainly, what is the one thing you're here to investigate? How do you earn the cult's blessing? Do you even know the power ranking of each member on this island? Or how they treat outsiders once you're through the front gates?" Loki swallowed. He knew none of those answers. Tony's eyes glittered. "Exactly. You're going in blind. No introductions, no favors, no idea how to survive a single test. You want to sneak in, receive the Void's favor, and stroll out with the secrets of creation in your pocket? Dream on." Damien watched, curious. He'd expected Loki to have prepared him better. "Follow me," Loki finally said, voice low. He steered Tony and Damien away from the glowing runes and down a short corridor. Once they reached a heavy iron door, Loki pressed a hidden panel. The door slid open, revealing a small laboratory crowded with glowing vials and arcane apparatus. A single lens mounted on a steel frame projected shifting glyphs on the far wall. Loki flicked on the lights. Here's where I break down the rules and give you the tips you'll really need before you meet anyone from the Void Cult outside this place. Tony nodded approvingly. Good, because if you ignore these protocols, you'll either leave empty-handed or not leave at all. Inside the lab, Damien found benches covered in scrapbooks, field notes, and jars filled with swirling black mist. Loki motioned toward a hollow projector. First, Loki began, the Void Cult values patience above all. You can't barge into an audience chamber demanding answers. You must offer tribute or insights of equal worth. Second, their power hierarchy is fluid. Alliances shift like quicksand. Know who holds the favor of the Void at any given moment, or you'll quickly become expendable. Tony leaned over to Damien. Remember that. Loki clicked to the next slide. Finally, show the right respect. Too much reverence is as dangerous as contempt. Oversell yourself, and they'll suspect you have espionage. Underplay it, and they'll see you as a threat to be crushed. Damien nodded, committing each rule to memory. Suddenly, the lab door whooshed open. Lalatina, the temple's steward, peered in, bewildered. Mr. Tony, I just saw you flying off with a stranger. Who is he? Should I prepare refreshments, or? Tony flashed her a wry smile. No refreshments needed this time, Lala. This isn't a guest on a courtesy call. I'll see him on his way when we're done. Lalatina blinked, then saluted awkwardly and slipped back out. Left alone, Loki rubbed his temples. Thor, who had been observing from the doorway, stepped forward with a booming laugh. By Odin's beard, Tony, you really know how to put Loki in his place. Tony shot Thor a grin. Someone had to teach him better. Damien stood between them, the rules of the Void divine religion etched firmly in his mind. The real test was only just beginning. On the 29th day, the long-awaited first update finally arrived. Damien had hoped Tony would teach Loki a real lesson, but he knew Tony wouldn't go so far. At most, he'd deliver a stern scolding. Still, Damien couldn't hide his relief at seeing Tony put Loki in his place. After all, Tony would never genuinely harm him, and Loki's safety was guaranteed.